Hey Barry,
Good morning.
how's the audio now?
Excellent.
Okay. I rebooted my machine and
Yeah.
things improved, strangely.
Yeah. Classical solution, reboot it or make sure it's plugged in. And that's the first two things you do.
So the closest equivalent to that for humans is a night's sleep. We don't do
Good night's
it
sleep. Yeah. Or a vacation.
because we don't do a hard reset.
No. Well, I think a vacation is as close as you can get. Uh, go off to the ashram for a season.
Well, it still doesn't completely eliminate and reset state.
That's called having a baby and then letting the baby become the new living creature in your
Oh,
stead.
off and then on. Yeah.
In fact, I think that's one of the reasons that nature invented having new babies so that you start tabula rasa and
Yeah.
hopefully make different mistakes and fewer of the old mistakes and maybe some new ones. But
That's why the saying that I've used is death works.
yeah, I mean, if you think about it from a scientific or philosophical point of view, it sort of does make sense that you've got to let the old stuff fade away and let the new stuff start over. And it's like when you try to make a crystal that doesn't have any impurities, you keep sweeping out the stuff until you sweep it infinite, well, not infinite, but an arbitrary number of times until there's no impurities left.
Yep. Yep.
And, but it takes living systems a long time because you keep adding new impurities in every iteration, as well as sweeping out the old ones or some of the old ones.
Well, eventually things themselves become impurities.
Well, yes, that's true. I mean, it's the byproducts, the byproducts are initially very small, but eventually it's like oxygen was the byproduct of plants, and eventually it created oxidation, which becomes also a resource, provided you tame it. You have to tame the oxidation process. So learning to reuse the waste products and turn them into a resource, and a lot of advances of civilization is learning to harness the waste products and turn them into a resource.
And then there's various optimizations that we try to apply, which again destabilize the system because we don't yet understand what true optimization means.
You know, yeah, obsoleting a long extant technology that has basically run its course. There's a term for that. And I can't remember what the term for that is. But it's an innovation which basically exterminates some previous thingy. Disruptive technologies, that's the term. One of the criteria, or one of the possibilities for innovation is disruptive technology that disrupts the old technology and displaces it. There's actually a group at the MIT Media Lab called Disruptive Systems or Disruptive Technologies that searches for disruptive solutions that obsolete some previous well-established one. I mean, if you look in communication technologies, look at all the cycles of reproducing audio that have come and then been disrupted by the next generation. The
Is it
wax
true
recordings.
disruption, though? Is it true disruption? See, I think the thing is we apply these words to the quote unquote technologies, but they don't actually apply to the technology, in my view. Okay. They apply to a meta issue about how we incorporate or adopt or integrated.
And they disrupted implementation. So the wax recordings of Edison get disrupted by, I don't know, vinyl or whatever the next medium was. The wire recording gets disrupted by tape recording. That gets disrupted by.
But that's not disruption, Barry. That's not disruption.
Well, okay. It's
disruption says, oh, we have to change a whole bunch of stuff. Okay. But if we're talking about a narrow domain, like how do you record audio, nothing's really disrupted. You go from 8 to 16 to 24 to 48-bit, nothing's really disruptive.
It's economically disruptive. So you still have vacuum tube audio is a niche, but it's no longer.
I think we toss around these terms like disruptive a little too irresponsibly.
Yeah.
I think it's not truly disruptive.
Yeah. But nonetheless, there is the notion of disruptive technologies in innovation research, whether they turn out to be making something go totally extinct or just push it into a niche hobbyist.
Okay, but wait, let's go back to the previous theme. Eric, we'll
yeah,
you up to
go ahead.
We'll get back to the previous theme, Barry, which is death works, right? We have cycles. So the old must make way for the new. That we both have said is natural, right? So the fact that something new replaces something old, I don't consider that disruptive. So you could say, yeah, it changes the economics for people who used to offer the old, and now for people who offer the new, yeah, these people now have to go find something else to do or whatever, go into maintenance mode, okay? But that's natural. That's not necessarily disruptive. I think.
Yeah, I think in nature, it's not so common in nature as it is in the technology sector, where you intentionally try to overthrow the old technology with a new one that takes its place, at least economically, is the dominant successor.
So
we don't make relay computers anymore, although you can just for fun,
Yeah, but see, I would prefer to use the word disruptive for something that's truly like threatening in some kind of existential sense. Okay, but if it's just natural evolution, I think it's not disruptive.
Will we ever disrupt carbon-based energy systems? Probably never, but it'll be displaced to a lesser role than won't be the dominant one. Although theoretically, if solar capture really becomes very efficient and very economical, it probably will totally wipe out pretty much all the other problematic ones like nuclear and the ones that generate pollution or.
So the people working on the old consider the new to be disruptive.
Oh yeah,
people who make vacuum tubes
we're not happy with transistors.
But if you take a look at civilization in total, we live with those cycles. We want the old to be replaced by the new. In some sense, we expect it. So I think that this word disruptive applies to us, we as humans, when we don't take the time to understand the first, second, third, fourth, fifth order effects of this cycle of change. Okay, so in other words, we say, oh, we got this now, let's slam it in here, and boom, we don't take a look at what it does to people, the economy, the ecosystem, the whatever. Okay, so we don't give ourselves the time to work out what those second and third, fourth, fifth order functions or derivatives look like.
Yeah, it disrupts
that is a problem with us. It's not a problem with the technology.
It's disrupting the unsustainable ones. Like, for example, the carbon button microphone was disrupted by the electret, but they had to disrupt it because they were running out of the carbon that was any good.
Anyway, I'm going to say it for the last time. I'm going to prefer not to use that word, and I could reserve it for truly.
No, it's fine. You don't have to use it. I'll probably use it where you don't care for it, but so what?
So I want to ask, what methodologies take into consideration all those aspects that you mentioned?
We don't bother to think about it. Okay, we think that today all we need to do is get people to work on the new. They offer it to the market, and so what about implications? Okay, so we have very few practices and values actually look at how do we responsibly incorporate the new. There's
investors like Warren. Go ahead.
Yeah. Are there some like Nora Bateson warm data that try to do that, or maybe not
Easily.
successfully?
Yeah, I mean, look at Warren Buffett. An investor tries to look for the ones that he thinks are going to win and take over economically, and so he will invest in the ones that he thinks are promising and will become the new paradigm, at least for a reasonable amount of time. So between the innovators and the investors, you sort of have a little bit of tension of, is my idea good enough that people would invest in it, and is it good enough that it will succeed?
Yeah, that's the economics we're living under.
Right.
It doesn't look at, okay, what are the other implications, longer term, fifth generation, seventh generation, other subsystems within society. We don't have truly valued and acknowledged responsibility to do that reasoning, to do that modeling, to do that enough.
Except that the investor will say, is this going to be a short-lived innovation that has a very short, uneconomical life cycle, or does it have a long-term life cycle? So there is a concern for whether the next innovation will be sustainable for enough period of time to recover your investment.
Economically, in terms of profit, but not other factors like health or.
Oh, yeah. Often because you don't know those.
No, we don't know those because we don't ask those.
Well, how long did it take before they finally figured out that tobacco causes cancer, the things that some stuff causes brain damage? And it took them a long time to get enough evidence to realize that they had to wipe out those old technologies.
But didn't the companies know about it in advance?
They did. If you understand the medicine, if you understand the neurophysics, chemistry, you understand that, you knew all those studies bullshit.
Mike Wallace did a famous documentary about cancer causing tobacco, and other, I think, might have been it was tobacco. He did a documentary showing that they knew about that long before the public really had the evidence at hand. That the insiders in the tobacco industry were reporting that, but the economic decision makers at the top were ignoring it for a long time.
Yep, and that's the same. That's the same thing I pointed out in Cory Doctorow's article. All these people at the top who think they're immune from everything,
right?
They can get away with it.
They have the golden parachute that they're going to make the money and have their retirement before the shit hits the fan.
So if we can't even have a functioning, viable, acknowledged, and respected journalism or a fourth estate that actually at least begins to gather factual data and actually start asking questions, then we can't ever get to the next step, okay? So the fact that journalism and all of that, questioning of what happens and questioning authority has been decimated. We even have journalism not even asking simple questions like, do we allow felons to run for office? They don't even ask that stupid question, okay? They don't ask the natural questions that should be asked. They don't say, here's what the Constitution says, here's what this guy did. It doesn't need to go any further. And yet we have a court system that entertains this bullshit, costs tens of millions of dollars, wastes all of our time, and lets this felon still have a platform and a bullhorn today because we don't have journalism that ask the right questions and get that proper respect and get that proper access.
If it's unmathematical or unethical, that's the last thing that will be determined to be the issue.
My answer to you, Eric, about asking that question is it doesn't happen, right?
No,
we don't have people that are set up to ask these questions and for these answers, these models to be properly considered in society. Yes, there are people trying to do it. We arguably are trying to do it in baby steps, okay? You can say other people like Nora, other people like David Buchtenberger and others are asking these questions. Their YouTube channels are asking these questions, but those are people off to the side.
Yeah.
They have
people who are
0.001% viewership or whatever.
Okay, so my next question, why don't they get recognition? And what is holding that back? Now, is it possible to have a system where they can publish and get recognized because it's decentralized? Can that happen? So think if they had a way they could self-publish and gain their own audiences, and the meme can spread without the corporate oversight.
But it has to go viral on its own, and that's tricky.
Right.
Very hard.
Mhm.
You have to be a very, very good presenter to go
Yep.
viral.
But not only that,
Sabina Hotzenfelder is demonstrating how to be a good independent presenter.
Right.
And it's a skill. It's a skill and a talent and an art.
we arguably are developing a eventual visibility platform, you know, whether it's decentralized, whether it's ledgers, whether it's you know, IPFS or whatever, some evolution of IPFS plus DNS plus, you know, wiki, whatever the word that Barry doesn't like. Some version of that is going to create a platform where eventually this stuff gets discovered, but it'll be decades, if not, you know, longer, unless AI decides to do something about that. So the fact is, we can now have various facts which we believe might live, despite the fact that, you know, journalism does not ask these questions, it does not look for these things as a whole. I'm not saying there aren't any, but as a whole, they don't, okay?
Yeah.
So eventually we have the discoverability of these models. So sooner or later, hundreds of years later, Galileo, if he was living today, would be discovered and say, oh, he said this a long time ago, okay? So that equivalent happened hundreds of years ago. Similarly, a modern day Galileo or Copernicus would have said, hey, this is what's happening. And decades later, somebody will say, oh, yeah, he said it was happening. Okay. That will be discoverable.
Yeah, Galileo didn't have calculus. He could do a linear ramp, but not a wavy ramp.
That's fine. Okay. At least he knew the phenomenon. He knew that something was going to happen.
He couldn't handle the wavy case, only the linear case.
It's a first approximation, right?
Right.
Which is fine. So I think structurally, the reason, again, is because we don't value these questions, right? We only value what is profit next quarter, what is profit next year, what is profit 4 years from now, and those various, you know, other metrics. But we don't ask, how are people's health affected? How are people's livelihood affected? How are people's lifespans affected? You know,
Or we ask, but the answer is we don't have enough evidence to give a definitive
because
answer.
we don't ask.
Well,
Oh,
it's also-
even people who ask, you know, it takes a long time to get evidence to
That's correct.
conclusively
It takes more
say
time.
that there is a cancer-causing agent,
That's
or
right.
there's a, you know, brain damage agent.
But the quest for profit, the quest for that, you know,
Oh yeah,
step up doesn't allow for us asking those questions and taking that time. It says, oh, we better move now. We get first mover advantage. Therefore, we got to go.
well, that means the incentive structure is wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Look at why we still use coal.
Okay. What is the incentive?
because we have 600 years supply of it that we know how to mine, and low paid labor will mine it in West Virginia, for example.
And China.
Yeah.
So these questions that we're asking are not that hard to answer. Or maybe it's simply because we've been revisiting them now for about 8 years. Other people have been revisiting for much, much longer. So
But you can't get people to buy into it, to believe it, to adopt it as a discipline, because they're not that disciplined, they're not that far-sighted. They're myopic.
I would say there are small communities around the world that are doing these things that we could learn from if they had exposure.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Now, in a decentralized internet, they can create their own exposure,
right,
by curating what matters to them. If each community curated that, and then it was shared among the communities and then grew, the meme can grow.
Small communities are like a cult. They're like a niche cult with followers who are, adhere to it, but the rest of the public is largely oblivious of it.
They'd also have the burden of presenting it in a way that other people would catch on that it's a good idea.
They don't find it entertaining or intriguing, compelling.
Well, that's human problem. Yeah.
Now here's the other problem. Okay. The problem is these ideas don't propagate by the merits of the idea themselves.
Right.
The problem is you ask for a leader. You ask for someone who can do the TED Talk or the YouTube channel or whatever. And that's the way humans operate, okay? And I understand that. But too often, then, the powers that be who feel that this word, this message is going to threaten our profits, that individual is vulnerable because no individual is perfect, right?
It doesn't get funded.
People will say, oh, this person, oh, he's not this, he's not that, he's this, he's that, and boom, that person then gets destroyed. So personality-led movements are susceptible. In fact, look at all the ones that are famous. Martin Luther King, he was assassinated, okay? Lincoln, assassinated, okay?
Gandhi assassinated.
Bernie was destroyed by the system. Like even the Democratic National Committee destroyed Bernie.
Systems thinkers don't get very far except in niche applications where their value outweighs their downsides.
And yet, you know, people will think, oh, Bernie, he's unelectable. He's too extreme. He's socialist, whatever, okay? But you take a look at the ideas, okay? And forget the labels. This is the natural movement of things, okay?
It's easier to be popular than a visionary. If you're popular, you're going to get farther than if you're a visionary. Visionaries don't get very far. Yep. They're only recognized until after it's sort of their, you know, everything else has fallen by the wayside.
That's Doug Engelbart's quote. Somebody asked,
for example, there you go.
Doug, are you just a visionary? And he said, what do you mean just a visionary? Being a visionary is hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then when do the paradigms change? Like, what was the last paradigm shift that we went through? What would you say? The internet or digitization?
Well, communication, computing,
social
transportation.
A lot of different domains have their own paradigm cycles.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Look at what's happening now with AI.
Yeah, that's a shift now. So.
Yeah, AI is not yet a paradigm shift, although I think it's poised to become one.
Depends how it's
already in the works.
Yeah, depends how it gets adopted. And
once they get it so that it doesn't make stupid, illogical mistakes, that it doesn't confuse plausibility.
Wait. People already make stupid, illogical mistakes. They don't get called out. So we're not smart enough to call out stupid, illogical mistakes.
Except the ones that AIs make are so blatantly ridiculous that people can see
them.
How
could it be more blatant than Donald the idiot Trump? We don't call him out.
Well, we three of us do.
Society seems to let him run for office, and the Supreme Court, the ultimate authority, says, yeah, he can do whatever the fuck he wants.
We can see that he's unethical, that he doesn't have the faculty of rigorous ethical reasoning or adherence to it. We can see that, and yet it's not a campaign issue that the lack of ethics is a disqualifying factor. Should be, but it isn't.
Truth, the lack of facts, the lack of consistency of those.
The president, it contradicts himself from one day to the next. That's well demonstrated. So
you guys come across this term called Gish Gallop?
Yeah, I've known it for a long time, although I tend to forget about it until it resurfaces. But it's the famous wall of text that you can shoot down any argument, no matter how good,
lies,
by burying it in a wall of verbiage. And I just got a wall of verbiage yesterday from a guy, a commenter on one of the YouTube channels, where he had no idea what he's talking about, but he just threw a ton of verbiage at me, which I totally ignored. But
it's not just verbiage; it's lies. So that you basically can't even.
It's gibberish.
Start refuting all this bullshit because there's so much of it.
You can. That's the thing about Hassenfelder. Without the gibberish, she points out that you can spot a lot of gibberish, but it's hard to dissect the gibberish and knock it down point by point because they keep throwing more gibberish at you.
So we're at the core issue now for why I personally call this the co-sense making, deep rocking, collaborology forum, because we don't have yet enough momentum / practitioners.
We don't have enough people like us.
Thinkers who will call into question and look at evidence and look at reasoning and figure out how to proceed from that foundation. Now, arguably, it's ineffective because the powers that be don't care about reasoning and truth. They only care about power.
Yep.
Okay, so they hang on to power. And the only hope I have is that eventually, if this doesn't go away, like for example, all of the notes, all the writings, all the videos, all of our transcripts don't go away, then this might inspire a movement as well, not just us, but hundreds of other groups like us, okay, who want to be more fact-based, more reasoning-based, more science-based, more critical thinking-based, modeling-based, etc., okay, simulation-based, who then say, okay, now we can truly question this particular claim, and ideally, in real time, let's say in a debate, say this is bullshit, okay, that's factual, etc., and not let somebody just bloviate for 2 bleeping minutes unobstructed by these idiot moderators who are not moderating bullshit. Okay, they don't do a job at all.
It's hard work. And
It's
people
not
can
hard
get it
work.
fast and
They
easy
just
knock it
choose
down.
not to do it. It's not that hard.
Or they're instructed not to do it.
Exactly.
We would have an audience. The audience loves the bullshit. They sit there and they bathe in the bullshit because they think it's entertaining.
Yeah.
You and I don't think it's entertaining. We think it's horrendous, but a lot of people find it very entertaining.
Now, can we compare this with the Terrence Howard debate? Yeah, like 1 × 1 = 2 now, by the way, in case you haven't heard.
Yeah. That got mentioned in yesterday's conversation, by the way.
Oh, yeah, cool. Yeah, because with a long form podcast, you have enough time for them to present their ideas, and then people can hear both sides, like Eric Weinstein giving the facts to him that this is the way science has been done and still is done, and this is the flaws in your reasoning, but he can still do his thing.
Wait. If the clickbait says 1 × 1 = 2, why do we need to go any further? Why do we need to waste more time on that?
Well, that was Neil deGrasse Tyson's reaction, but he took the time to go through the paper and give him the points that he needs of why this would not pass muster. So, yeah. So you can go from that point, but he gave him the time to explain himself and show his diagrams and the little models he made. But the flaw is that he's thinking in a way that mainstream doesn't understand. And he's like bringing his whole experience to his theories, but they're not scientific. That's the point, that it's not scientific method.
It's not whether we understand or not understand. It's that there's nothing to understand. 1 × 1 = 2 is not a derivation you can create. 1 × 1 = 1 is a definition. Okay, you can't argue definitions. If you're going to write these definitions, you have a completely different system of learning, which means you're not basing it on whatever's come before it. Okay, now it may hold water on its own, but it doesn't align with what we quote unquote already know, right? So if you're, the first sign of a cult, by the way, is everything you know is false, right? So he's trying to start a cult. So why the bleep do we need to care? Okay, now if he shows us something that really works, like if he shows us anti-gravity, or if he shows us faster than light travel, or if he shows us how to get rid of addictions, fine, I'll listen to him. But he's got no result right now that compels me to give him any cycle of my brain at all.
Right. Right.
Have you seen the item in math where the sum of the positive integers sums to -1/12? There's a famous piece of mathematics where people can show, quote unquote, show that the sum of the integers adds to -1/12, and then people try to people like Mathologer, for example, try to explain where's the flaw in that mathematics, and it ain't easy. And in fact, Ramanujan even had
almost on the statement of it. I don't even want to take a look at it.
But the thing is that it's curious how people can have derived that, including Ramanujan derived it, and then how do you dispel it? Mathologer spent a couple of videos on that one, as well as a few other people. This sum of the positive integers, the harmonic sum adds to -1/12. Even Riemann, I think, has something that sort of fits in with that. And it's very curious as you go, why can't you just toss that out? Or, why is there any evidence to support it?
Well, you got to find the error in there.
Right, find the error. And this is like dividing the famous dividing by zero error, where you have a symbol that you believe you can divide by and you get these mistakes. And the classical divide by zero error is probably easier to find than this one in the sum of the integers is minus 1/12. But you'll see Mythologer has a long video on where's the mistake in that.
Okay, so what attracts people to these videos? They just want to zone out?
No, what attracts you to them is that how do you find a subtle mistake?
Okay.
How do you recognize and reveal a subtle mistake? Because there are mistakes everywhere. Some are more subtle than others. And notion
do people care about that? That's
well, for example, I try to show why Bell's inequality includes a subtle mistake where the inequality looks correct, but in fact it doesn't agree with observation. Where's the mistake? And it ain't, you can, once you point out the mistake, it's sort of obvious, and yet there are people who will never appreciate that there is a mistake in it. And this is this guy who gave me a wall of text yesterday. And, there was a video of, do you accept Bell's inequality or do you accept Bell's theorem? And the short answer is no, because it's disproven by observation or measurement. And yet people like Tim Maudlin keep promoting it, why it's an interesting theorem, why it's apparently true mathematically.
Okay, but you have found the error?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you published something that explains how you found that error and where it is and your line of reasoning, you could say, so I'm thinking in the future, like you could promote that yourself on your own decentralized.
And I've written it up multiple times. I've written it up.
Okay. So what I'm thinking is like, if you curated your writings and made it searchable and people could find that alternative, that as an alternative, if it's linked in the right way, like a real rich link that this is an argument against this, and you can easily
But I have a very small audience. I've written a ton of stuff, but I have a very small readership.
I understand. I'm just thinking for the future, somebody like you who had good ideas and you don't want it to get buried 100 years from now, what could be done to keep that? So like if you could curate, then the next generation could curate and
in fact,
keep it alive.
I didn't actually find the mistake on my own.
Right.
A UK physicist who goes by the handle Muon Ray, he never uses his real name, actually hinted at me, or actually told me why, where the mistake was.
Okay.
But he himself, as far as I know, has never published it. He simply whispered it to me in a long conversation.
Okay, so what you just said here, which is on video, is a piece of provenance that could get lost if no one knows about it.
Well, there are people who know about it. Even Feynman said Bell's inequality is irrelevant. He dismisses it, but he doesn't explain why he dismisses it. Only the fact that he dismisses it way back in like the 1970s.
Okay, so that's another piece of provenance. See, what I want is to have all these links available, and that they don't disappear over time. So that we can go back to Barry 1,000 years from now. We could find Barry's proof of this.
Archimedes had the calculus way back, and it got lost. It got bleached out and erased, and some liturgical prose was overwritten it.
Yep. So decentralized network is replication into content
doesn't go viral. None of my stuff goes viral.
It doesn't have to. I'm thinking a future system where your data is replicated and content addressable.
Yeah.
And then because it's replicated, you have backups all over, and it can be found by traversing this distributed tree somehow. And you could have links between these distributed nodes, which you can see arguments and inferences.
You need one of the consequences of general relativity to reveal why Bell's inequality doesn't apply.
Okay, that's interesting.
And one of the key consequences of general relativity is that timekeeping is local.
Yep.
Timekeeping here is not the same as timekeeping here. So if you have two things that start off in phase lock synchrony and they spread apart, then now they age independently because of gravitational gradients along their axis.
Hmm.
And as soon as you have that, you also explain why quantum computing is so damned hard, because qubits they decohere. And they decohere within like a microsecond or two.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, the reliability has to be
And the thing is that you can slow down decoherence by cooling to absolute zero, but you can't get gravitational gradients to disappear. So that's the one thing you can't get rid of, except to have your quantum computer inside of a space where there's no gravitational gradients. Therefore, timekeeping is universal everywhere, and they'll stay in phase lock synchrony forever. But all of the Bell test experiments were on an axis and a table in a room. Right. So now you imagine you line up your experiment east-west on the dawn of the day of the new moon. So now you got a gravitational gradient with the sun and the moon pulling in the easterly direction. And so it's pretty obvious that you got a strong gravitational gradient. But you need any gravitational gradient, not just a strong one. And they decohere. The photons get, a laser, the photons are all coherent because they're all traveling side by side. So even though there's gravitational redshift or blue shift of the photons, they're staying coherent. But if they go opposite directions, one's going to have a redshift, one's going to have a blue shift, and they're going to decohere. That's not a complicated thing to appreciate once you get gravitational redshift and blue shift from general relativity.
Yes, like someone like Richard Feynman would be able to explain that to anybody, right?
Yeah. But the thing is, Einstein was dead by the time John Bell published his little paper, and it remained obscure for like 10 years. Nobody even saw it. So the people who could have debunked it right away were dead or retired or, didn't see it.
So would you say that a whole industry is being built upon a false theorem?
And Tim Maudlin's whole industry, he has the Center for, the J.S. Bell Institute or whatever, and he keeps teaching this thing over and over again, but you can only prove it for the case of a constant parameter that's not time varying. If you have a state variable that's not time varying, then Bell's inequality is fine. But as soon as it's time varying, then you have to have the timekeeping is uniform everywhere in the cosmos, which is Newton's idea, which Einstein dispels. Timekeeping is local.
Okay, so you have investors putting billions of dollars into things that you're saying will not work.
Well, that you'll never get rid of decoherence.
Yeah, it's not perfect. But
you have to have the things very, very close together so that there's almost no gravitational gradient to speak of. And even so, you only get, maybe a dozen cycles before the decoherence screws you up, but at absolute zero.
Yeah. So just as an analogy, I'm thinking like with Michael Faraday discovering the lines of force in magnetism. Well, people were first discovering this by putting compasses around an electric current, and they were confused. Well, why should there be an interaction with a compass?
So it's an interesting problem, and what's interesting about it is not that it's wrong, not that Bell adopted an incorrect model. It's that what was it about his simplified model that caused him to compute a mathematical prediction that doesn't hold in our cosmos. And that requires a little bit of appreciation of general relativity. I'm sort of one of the very first ones. The timekeeping is local. And therefore, phase lock synchrony of things that are separated in space is no longer guaranteed. They're going to age at their, my heartbeat runs at a different speed than your heartbeat. You can count the number of cycles of photon, at plus and minus x, and they have to have exactly the same number of cycles along their path, or else they're out of phase, which they don't. They don't. So the age of a photon is how many times it's reversed its E field when it gets to plus and minus x. They're different.
So are you younger when you're in Massachusetts than I am in Pennsylvania?
Well, I mean, people have looked at the twin paradox
Mhm.
but the thing, that a photon emanating from the sun has a redshift because it's climbing a gravitational gradient, so it's losing energy. So it shifts to the red. The gravitational redshift is, you can go to Wikipedia and there's an article on it. But most people don't think about that. Even though they know that there's a gravitational gradient, we have tides, especially the spring tides when the sun and the moon are, all pulling in the same direction. Then you can really see the tides. You can't pretend they don't exist.
Yeah, actually, tides are not a straightforward problem.
Well, but they knew that they were associated with the monthly cycle of the sun and the moon. Well,
Right.
the moon really, not the sun.
Mhm.
I don't think it was very hard for them to figure out that the moon was responsible for the tides.
Yeah, I think it's the actual interaction, what
Yeah.
that interaction is was.
But the fact that gravitational gradients affect the phase of a photon, nobody would have guessed that until they had photons and they had general relativity.
Mhm.
Anyway, that's good luck. Good luck explaining that to the doofuses who simply are enamored of Bell's inequality, even though it's a falsehood.
Yep.
Especially Tim Maudlin.
I put in 2 or 3 notes following up on Eric's comment about persistence and decentralization.
Mhm. Okay.
Well, a lot of falsehoods are persistent in our culture. It's really hard to dispel an axiom that's actually a falsehood,
And
a presumptive axiom. Yeah. Which kind of explains why our governance models are so screwed up, because they're based on a false axiom.
And yet, if we allow our decisions to be driven by voting, and the votes are driven by people
Who don't know about false axioms because they don't know mathematics.
understand, and their understanding in the various different decisions tends to be simplistic because that's what they got time for. Okay.
Yeah.
And they don't have the training for more than that.
Yeah.
And yet they're asked to make influential decisions that almost by definition can't consider the more complicated models, the more strategic models, the more interactions between subsystems and submodels.
Yeah.
They think linearly. They don't think in terms of delayed feedback. They don't think in terms of multiple systems and non-monotonic behavior.
I don't think mathematically.
It doesn't factor into the way decisions get made. And then why do we even think, oh, how do we get into this mess? It's because we let simple-minded decision-making, take place over the quote-unquote better considered options.
Sloppy thinking is ubiquitous. Sloppy thinking is ubiquitous.
Not just that, we don't allow better thinking. We don't allow better thinking to have influence.
We don't know how to do better thinking. I watch these cracking the cryptic puzzles where Simon Anthony solves these really hard Sudoku class puzzles. And in almost every case, his thinking is so rigorous and so precise, and I'm astonished that he could figure that out. I never would have seen that. Time and time again, I go, I just don't have that level of logical precision.
Yeah, it takes training.
How can he have seen that and figured it out? And I'm just, my eyes are spinning.
Yeah, if they have the training and the pattern matching development, yeah.
And I'm no slouch when it comes to mathematical applications, but he's orders of magnitude better at it than I could ever have been. And I can see why, if I were trying to solve those same problems, I would fall prey to lots and lots of sloppy thinking.
Now, I've seen people like Gene Bollinger, who can show you systems theory with diagrams, and he does videos showing like, okay, this is a case where these two actors don't see this externality down here, and and it makes he could show the logical arguments of the types of systems that he's analyzed. But yeah,
once in a while, I will see a place in a Sudoku puzzle that Simon hasn't yet seen. That is the one that's going to give you the next logical deduction. And rarely, once in a while, I will see one that he hasn't yet noticed. Eventually he'll notice it, but it might take 5 or 10 minutes. And then in the comments, people will say, I've been yelling at you for that. Look at that, look at that cell. And once in a while I will see one. Most of the time he's way ahead of me.
Yeah, well, think about the chess masters,
right?
How they operate. They're looking for patterns and mid-game, end-game strategies. Yeah.
Right. So I'm very sympathetic to the issue of sloppy thinking, because I'm susceptible to sloppy thinking all the time.
We all are. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard to find somebody who's so rigorous that they can avoid coming to false conclusions. Of course, in a Sudoku puzzle, there is only one answer that's correct. So at the end of the day, if you have sloppy thinking, the Sudoku's got an inconsistency in it, and you know it's wrong. It doesn't mean you can find where you went wrong.
Right, but isn't that why the peer review process was put in?
That's one of the things the peer review will do, is it'll help identify mistakes.
Yeah, sloppy thinking
mistakes. But then the author has to agree that, yes, you have found a correct instance of sloppy thinking. And there are writers who will never accept it. They will dismiss the peer review. Go ahead, Sam.
Then they're not in the quote unquote method of academia/science. But that's a side comment.
That's the would-be scientists.
We're trying to get everybody to think clearly. That is impractical and not reasonable.
It's unrealistic.
What we do is create a society which can identify it, as you guys have been saying. And I say, here's another analogy. Here's another possible aligned analogy. And that is, no computer on the internet is expected to be perfect, right? But you want to build in enough redundancy, enough resilience, enough, backup, enough, protocol to say, hey, if I'm failing, you take over. Or, hey, if you're failing, take a rest, I'll take over.
Okay? Even if it's not making mistakes, it's working on the wrong problem. It's working correctly on the wrong problem and not working on the problem that needs to be identified to solve.
Refinement, but at the basis of it, it's, bing, I got something to worry about, let somebody else take over. Okay, that system level resiliency works when you still have imperfect individual compute.
Yeah,
so individual, confused thinkers, as long as the community works well to find and then correct that mistake. Okay, and that's what we're not appreciating as a society.
Yep.
As a society, we say, go ahead and think whatever you want. Go ahead and vote whatever you want, regardless of how idiotic and indefensible it is.
The grand experiment that fails after so many centuries and the civilization collapses.
So the social experiment about democracy is fundamentally flawed in this reason.
Socrates said that. Socrates said that from day one. Democracy has a flaw that's going to trip it up someday.
Right. And it's still better than a monarchy. It's still better than a dictatorship.
Yeah.
We're now about to regress back into a dictatorship if we don't fundamentally understand this.
Yeah, well, that was Vico's observation, the cycle from 3 flawed governance models. And as soon as one governance model runs out of steam, they cycle around to the one that hasn't been used for a while. And there's this famous Baconian cycle, of which the time in between the cycles is chaos.
We're about to enter.
But what happens is more and more time is now spent in the chaos phase.
The new Dark Ages.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, if you want to solve the problem of chaos, you've got to get into the mathematics of chaos theory to figure out how to solve it.
And by the way, you know who called it 60, 70 years ago?
Doug Engelbart.
He didn't call it this precisely. I'm talking about somebody else.
Anybody else?
Isaac Asimov and Foundation.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
I haven't read Foundation. I have a copy of it. I never read it.
It was on Apple TV, so it's a
Oh,
series.
it's a video now?
Of it was on Apple TV. Yeah, it's an entertaining adaptation.
Yeah,
Wait.
somebody gave me the paperback versions of it like 40 years ago, but I never read them.
Barry, if you got time, I recommend it.
I
Now,
have to get Apple TV. I don't have Apple TV.
no, you don't have to watch it. All you got to do is read the books. Okay.
Oh, then I got to get my reading glasses, which I've got.
Here's the thing:
Your new eyes.
don't expect good writing. Okay, I actually don't appreciate Isaac Asimov's writing as a writer. He's got good ideas in that series, but I don't find the writing particularly compelling. Okay, that's my own view.
I might go look for a summary of the Foundation series by a good literary analyst.
In fact, I would be entertained to sit back and let Eric tell you the fundamental, premise of this series.
Okay, so Harry Seldon is a psychohistorian. So he's come up with the mathematics that can predict downfalls of empires, and he's come up with some proof now that the current empire is going to fall, and there'll be a long period of darkness. And he's wondering, okay, how can we shorten the darkness? And he has ideas which are rejected by the empire, and the empire eventually does fall. But
He's like Nate Silver is today. Nate Silver is the guy with the mathematics that can figure out athletic game.
right. But before all that happens, he is banished to a remote planet called Terminus, which is light years away. And yeah, and so on that planet, he sets up his own group of people in the society, and their idea is, okay, well, let's study this problem of how to shorten the darkness. And eventually it brings other nearby planets who have been in a war together. And I think that's where they left off in the Apple version.
It's basically the darkness is probably your metaphor for chaos theory.
Yeah.
And the solution to chaos theory is found in the mathematics of chaos theory. That you've got to have feedback control theory that's real-time computing optimal practices, because you have to observe where the chaos is moving into, because you can't predict it.
Right.
And so you have to wait for the next observation to get the next adjustment of your cybernetic steering mechanism.
But what's interesting is within all that chaos, there are characters who emerge, and some of the unexpected consequences of it. So you have to follow these people's lives and see the ideas they come up with, and how how it becomes some kind of resistance, which would then eventually get overthrown, and how it's a whole dynamic.
It's the power play. I remember once when people were talking about value systems, a rabbi once said, if you look at the most popular value, if you try to make a hierarchy of values, the most popular values are sex, power, and money. That more people are driven by sex, power, and money than by the kind of values that would be virtuous. Socrates writes this thing about virtue, and most of our values are not the virtuous ones. They're the unvirtuous values: sex, power, and money. Look at Trump. Is a paradigm of sex, power, and money is what drives him.
So how about Aldous Huxley's Brave New World? Yeah. Go ahead.
I was about to add a few other details to
Yeah, go for it.
in that on this planet Terminus, he thinks he can shorten this 20,000 years of darkness to maybe 1 or 2,000. I forget what the exact numbers are, but he just wants to take us out of the darkness as soon as we can. So he sets up this thing called the Foundation, which is essentially the Library of Alexandria, the modern version of the Library of Alexandria, so that as we need it, that knowledge is available for people who are emerging from the darkness. He also, oh, by the way, he did this out in the open. He was very upfront about it, because he was saying, well, because I predicted this, we need this to get out of that. And so he was very upfront about it. Much, much later, in fact, should I spoil this for him? No, I should not spoil this for him.
I'm going to look it up anyway.
All right. Well, just to complete the story, much, much later, we find out that not so openly, he has set up a second foundation. Because the second foundation values all the stuff that the first foundation ostensibly does not.
Oh, the anti-values?
No.
The complementary values?
Yes. I won't say more about that because that's the teaser, but I think it's quite insightful in that.
Yeah.
So
But, I mean, ethics and theology are all about selecting out the virtuous values and de-emphasizing the unvirtuous values, the ones that are going to eventually bring a downfall.
right. And not only that, because this psychohistory, which I don't like the name of, okay? I much prefer the name sociomatics, but he's Isaac Asimov, I'm nobody, okay? But because psychohistory only deals with large numbers, laws of large numbers. It does not deal with individuals.
Right.
So he cannot predict certain anomalous characters, which is why a certain character emerges in this story who he could not predict.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah, the Lulu.
This character is called the Mule.
Okay.
But this one is called the Mule. And then there's an interesting aspect of how this whole story has to be able to accommodate or factor in the effects of an anomaly like the Mule.
Yeah. Little Lulu. That was a comic strip, Little Lulu. The character whose behavior, you had to read the comic strip every day because you didn't know what Little Lulu was going to do the next day. Didn't have a pattern.
Wasn't that Dennis the Menace also?
Yeah, but yeah, Calvin, Dennis the Menace. There's a lot of comics that have a character in it who's just totally unpredictable from one day to the next. And they're entertaining in a comic strip. In real life, they drive you crazy because they're unregulated. Totally unregulated. No regulatory mechanism short of incarceration or execution, is going to be viable. So if you're going to let them have a life, they're going to be totally unpredictable from one day to the next.
So one of the things I said I'm going to do, and I'm doing it, it's taking longer than I expected, is the ideas in 2009 that I shared with some colleagues and have dubbed Global Sim is now available via AI, large language models, via Kaggle, via GitHub and Git. All of that, 98% of it is available now. So the next step in that evolution is to take all of that and give it some visibility as factor in your fair witness idea, which again is a Heinlein idea. Okay, so you factor your Heinlein's fair witness idea into Global Sim. And you can now try and use this as an infrastructure to provide commentary / context on the social national discourse.
You have to make it entertaining. You can have stuff available that's not consumed because it's not entertaining.
Entertainment value can come and be added separately. Okay, I understand the importance of it.
Oh yeah, otherwise you get no audience.
That's where Mentor can come in, but Global Sim itself is the knowledge substrate under which over which something like a mentor can present it to the masses, or present it to children, or present it to politicians, or present it to Barry Court. Okay. It can have a different way of presentation, but the foundation itself can be something that all of us contribute to. So if I say I disagree with that model and I'll put this submodel in place of that one, but keep the entire thing and rerun it, and everybody in the world can do this, that's global sim. So now no longer are we saying, oh, he's better looking, so I'm going to vote for that guy. Or he's black, so I'm going to vote for that guy.
Or he's more entertaining.
This person is female, so I'm going to vote for that guy. That person, okay? It's taking such simplistic thinking out of its power in society. And I would also prefer, by the way, this form of representative democracy, where if I say, hey, if I don't understand forestry and vegetation and food production and transportation, whatever, I'm going to take my responsibility for deciding those issues. I'm going to give that to you as a proxy, or Klaus.
Technocracy, where you're delegating to the technocrats the management, something that they know how to calculate the optimal management, and you have to trust them.
Somebody like Klaus could emerge, somebody like, Barry can emerge, somebody like Eric can emerge, somebody like I can emerge in our respective areas of modeling. Yeah. If those do better than other models,
Anthony Fauci.
Exactly. Then those should be the ones that emerge and start getting aggregated together into these large models.
And yet Anthony Fauci just wrote a book about how awful it was trying to be the sane adult scientist in the house.
Right.
And how hard it was for him to maintain some kind of enough level of respect from the doofuses.
So anyway, that's something I'm working on. I'm writing that up.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'll probably spend a few $100s and create an institute with that as the charter.
Yeah. And then you have to make it go viral. You have to be a cult that's got a following.
I don't have the personality for that.
None of us have a very big following. That's one of the things that, it's a sad but true observation. We have very small followings, the three of us.
Well, getting that.
Go ahead. You say it, Eric.
Yeah, I got 150 subscribers to my YouTube videos. So
you got more than I do.
I don't know, only have about half that number. My son, by the way, posted a video when he was 10. This is like over 20 years ago. He's got 3 million views on that video.
Wow.
He's made hundreds, if not thousands of dollars from YouTube doing that.
There's one episode of Cracking the Cryptic that's got 7 million views. And it's a Sudoku puzzle that was invented by a Dutch puzzle setter. He's famous. Odd van de Wettering is his name. And he doesn't do a lot of them, but they're so fabulous. And they're easy. Most of them are not that hard to solve, that almost anybody can not only follow the solution, but instantiate the solution. And yet they're mind-blowing. But 7 million views on one Sudoku puzzle they do 2 a day, every day for 5 years or something. But there are geniuses who can create extremely intriguing and entertaining and solvable puzzles. But most of Sudoku puzzles are banal and uninteresting. They're just exercises or homework exercises, but they're not fun. They don't really make you go wow. The ones that make you go wow are the ones that they feature on the channel. But most of those are also pretty hard to solve.
So I don't play Sudoku. I know you do. In my mind, because I don't appreciate it, but why is it the case that Sudoku isn't just a brute force problem? Why is there creativity involved?
Because they only solve problems that you can solve logically with rigorous step-by-step logic and not guess. It's not solved by they're never solved by brute force. They're never solved by guessing.
Aren't all of them that way, though?
Sorry?
Aren't all of them like that? Aren't all of them susceptible to logic approach?
No, there are examples of Sudoku which are very hard to solve logically, because they have what's called bifurcation, that you can boil it down to one of two values for a cell, but then after that, you got to go for a very, very long chain before you find out that one of them becomes inconsistent at the last step. And the ones that have bifurcation in them, they're not logically solvable. You can only bifurcate for like 2 or 3 or 4 steps ahead to see that one of them leads to an inconsistency, and then you can resolve the bifurcation. But they're not called bifurcation if they're very short. That's just called a logical deduction. That there's only one value for this cell is the weakest cell, and there's only one value that doesn't quickly lead to a contradiction. And finding that one cell and showing that it only has one logical value, the logic that's involved is quite oftentimes quite intricate and difficult to discover unless you've got, some kind of the brain that can do that.
I had a logic class in college where it was like formally laid out in mathematics with unions, intersections, and implications. So we tried to derive logical proofs from that.
There's also Sudokus that have multiple lawful solutions, and they only do ones that have a unique solution. And oftentimes the problem is to find why potentially 2 different solutions, why one of them doesn't work, and therefore there's only one unique one. But you don't use uniqueness as a clue. You don't use, even though you know that these problems only have a unique solution, logically you do not use uniqueness as a clue, because that's in some sense cheating from the notion that they have to be solved step by step logically. It's a little bit subtle about that, but they explain why you don't, even though you can detect that there's a uniqueness issue, that you don't use it. If it would lead to two equivalent solutions, then you throw away those branches.
If I model it as a search space, then I understand how search spaces work, and if they're inadequately constrained, then yes, of course, they can go forever.
Yeah, and or you get things that can be cyclical, but the cycle's really long, so it's really hard to follow the chain without getting lost or confused. I mean, I love watching these cracking the cryptic, because they not only demonstrate brilliant logic, but they also reveal to me how hard it is to carry out brilliant logic, and in less than an hour. Not over days, weeks, or months, trial and error. They don't use trial and error. That's the whole point. It's not trial and error, which parallel solving really is, massive trial and error. That's what makes them interesting, is that they try to have smooth logic, so that there is not exactly, most of the time it is exactly one cell that you have to get next to have a linear solution. And if you don't get that one, you get stuck. And so being able to find the one step that's going to keep you moving and not end up, getting lost in the weeds.
So would you say it's like geometric proofs that you do?
They often do. One of the things that they do is, since you're solving these on a computer, besides putting numbers into a square, you can put colors into a square. And so you'll put a color that can represent a subset of the numbers.
Okay.
And, like all the evens or all the odds or whatever. And then you can say, well, this is a yellow and that's a yellow, so there can't be a yellow there. You don't know what the yellow is. You only know that it's standing. It's like algebra. It stands for an unknown, but subset of all the numbers. And so a lot of logic is done with the coloring thing. And those techniques are rather remarkable, and they get back to combinatorial logic. They sort of instantiate the easier aspects of combinatorial logic that you can see visually. You can visualize the combinatorial logic. The real combinatorial logic, the full-fledged of it, It's symbolic, and it's sort of, I think it's beyond the scope of a human to do it at the deepest level of combinatorial logic.
You know, if you look at diagrams of chips, the circuits inside, the logic, yeah, they can really get complicated.
Absolutely. But, you know, if you're interested in, you know, rigorous logic and mathematics and problem solving, it's a nice diversion. I can watch multiple episodes a day and keep myself, you know, not only entertained but flabbergasted.
What I find fascinating is like people who design chips these days, they use a language called Verilog, which is really like specifying all the logic symbolically, and
Right.
then these gate arrays will implement your program, and you'll have a
And they're
hardware
probably
chip.
using computers to process the number crunching, because you can't do it. You probably can't do it in your head for these big chips.
Mhm.
Are they
Yeah,
down
so
1.6 nanometers now?
Something like that. Yeah.
We used to think a million switches at a network was big.
Well, I mean, we grew up with megahertz was what was on the radio dial, you know, 100 megahertz in the FM band. And that was, you know, 6 megahertz for channel 6, I think it was.
Now that I think what they're in the tens of billions, right? Are they have they reached over 100 billion yet? I don't think so.
You can ask me to play a radio station or ask for music on a different app.
Oh, that's your watch?
Siri thought I was asking about 6 megahertz.
funny.
I don't know what I said that got Siri turned on.
Siri, what's the weather? It's not listening.
Siri, what's the weather?
It's currently partly cloudy at 84 degrees.
There you go.
Mm. Now, the inventor of Siri, his last name is Chire.
Yeah, Adam and his brother. What's his brother's name? Yeah, they sold that to Apple for $100 million.
Okay, now is that related to the Engelbart, the person who worked with Engelbart?
He's the same person as talks about Engelbart, but he was on a different code base. It was not based on Engelbart's code, obviously. And they took it just to a certain level and then sold it for $100 million. And what did they do? I think that was originally government funded also, or government sponsored.
Mhm.
Yeah. I was, hate to say this, a few years ahead of them, but never was able to take that into the open.
Mhm.
It was always very, very highly classified. But I did systems that tried to process text, particularly scientific journal abstracts and citations,
Oh, sure.
and try to create networks of who's funding whom, who's working with whom, what institutions, how much money, what topics, building big topic trees. Did all of that in the late 80s. But Adam and his brother sold it to Apple. I was in very classified, can't talk about this kind of projects.
Mhm.
Aaron Schwartz got arrested for trying to do that. He was downloading academic papers from JSTOR and processing them, looking for patterns where the funder was skewing the science.
Wow.
And the IT people noticed that there was this huge hit on the JSTOR archives at MIT, and they arrested him and charged him with a federal crime of accessing website, the JSTOR website, beyond the nominal amount of time. And he got charged for this federal crime, and he ended up committing suicide. Because it's sad, real smart guy.
Aaron, right? Aaron Schwartz?
Aaron Schwartz, yeah.
Yeah, he was very young at the time when he did that. Yeah.
I think he was in his 20s.
But see, I didn't make the mistake of doing it on US data. I was doing it on non-US data.
Yeah.
And by the way, it was government sponsored.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, here comes Joshua.
So it's interesting what analytics you can derive once you have all that data.
Yeah.
That is the new oil. Right?
Yeah.
It is the new
Yeah,
oil.
data mining. Yeah, data mining.
That's what AI is.
Number crunching to data mining.
So it's interesting, you would not think about this, but from the time of publication of a new novel phenomenon, what they're trying to figure out is when could this idea become weaponized? That was the
Mhm. Okay.
and it was asking that question of every discovery. Every paper was looked at in that context.
Yeah. Finding the cheaters.
I would say more than that, but that was the fundamental question.
Without being a cheater.
But if you look at the history of computing, it was military applications that started all that research.
That's right.
ARPANET, yeah,
All the way back to Alan Turing.
Yep.
that's true. That was military.
Mhm.
Yeah, cracking the code.
Right. Yeah, I bet you if you look at the origins, which I don't know the story of an abacus, it was probably also for military advantage.
Yeah, how many stones do we have to throw at these people? Let's count the stones.
Or how much food do we need to move this army to that location?
Yep.
Logistics. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, logistics is fascinating.
Mhm.
It's difficult. Logistics is not an easy class of problem to solve.
You know, in the government, that's probably the most systems-oriented thinking that we can find evidence.
I think it is because it's arcane enough that only bureaucrats or technocrats would ever do it.
And it's traceable when you make a mistake. Oh, you didn't figure out enough toothpaste? You know, how come? Well, this model didn't account for blah, blah, blah. Okay. Too much, last week or whatever it is. Okay.
The group I was in at MITRE was working for the Air Force Logistics Command, trying to provide tools for Air Force logistics. That's when I learned what the word was and that there were people working in the field of logistics.
Yeah, people think it's all linear operations.
Yeah, no, it's combinatorics. Again, it boils down to combinatorics, which is most people. I mean, a lot of puzzles are combinatorical puzzles, and the question is, what combinatorical puzzle is solvable by a good human brain, and doesn't require exhaustive brute force search to find the unique combination?
And shortest path.
Mhm.
Yeah, for example. Yeah.
Think about it. We now have a space force, so we'll have military space and the logistics for that. Okay, well, how do you get this amount of stuff up to space, and how do you get the Boeing thing back home?
And the Pauli exclusion principle: two satellites cannot occupy the same space or they collide.
Yeah.
That's what you want to avoid the applying the Pauli exclusion principle the hard way.
Yep. And how do you clean up all the space junk?
Yeah, that makes it even worse. The quantum exclusion principle that you fog up the whole sky with microparticles. It's like the microplastics on the biosphere. They get into everything.
So if you could send a society to Mars to start over and figure it out, would they make it do any better than we did a few hundred years?
Only if you send if you send Harry Seldon to Mars, maybe. You send the doofus to Mars, probably not.
Right.
We're more likely to send, a dictatorship to Mars.
Don't send Marjorie Taylor Greene to Mars.
No, I think we should send her and a bunch of.
Okay, that's sending Napoleon to Elba, right? So Mars is the new Elba for the outcasts, like the new Australia for the crooks.
So I'm in the process of writing this up.
But write it up in an entertaining fashion so you have a non-zero audience.
That's version 2. I still
Daniel Quinn wrote up his thesis, I think, a dozen times over something like 20 years before he finally found a way to write it up that won him the Turner Prize for the best piece of American fiction that was worth reading.
After I write it up, I'll ask one of these GPTs to create a song parody on it.
Yeah,
Or
that's a good, yeah.
course on it, or
Poetry and song. I mean, I can't write.
or to create a Coursera OCW course on it.
Yeah. Of course, I can't take credit for the poetry because I didn't write it, but but I can entertain people. I mean, I'll take a paragraph of theirs and toss it in and say, turn this into a poem and give it back to them, and they're
See, there's
thrilled.
a key distinction here. I think entertainment for entertainment's sake is sad and resource sucking. Entertainment for the purposes of enlightenment in some way, I think is a good pursuit.
It was more valuable than just pure, well, one time only throwaway entertainment. But getting somebody just to, they say, well, you made my day. Or I said, I made one day, that they smiled once in one day. Okay. That's not a bad objective.
It's better than some. Yeah.
See, what I like to do is like watch old Star Trek episodes and look at it in terms of the human relations, how the command and control structure works or doesn't work, and also like the time travel stuff, fun things, paradoxes, and yeah, how does that all work?
Notice, I think it would be too paradigm shifting for them to completely abandon the strictly hierarchical military model on the Enterprise.
At that time, yeah.
Yeah.
But over the new series, it changes. So.
They had like 3 or 4 reinventions of the Star Trek genre, didn't they?
Oh yeah, it's still going on. There's a new, like the Strange New Worlds is one of the newer ones, and that has Captain Pike, and he's more of a modern type of manager.
Although he precedes Kirk.
Yeah, he does precede Kirk, but what they've done is they've adapted it to the audience.
Non-hierarchical, yeah.
Yeah.
Peer-to-peer and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, he listens more to more opinions, there's more diversity. And they do bring up some compelling topics. Some of the discrimination, and I mean, it's all is a parallel of modern society.
In fact, I don't know, you guys are probably Trek aficionados, so you're probably also members of the Trek group in Facebook. But there was a nice post this past week or two about a very short scene where somebody was asked to do something, and Uhuru stepped into that person's position at the con, and it was just an extra half second on the scene, and it didn't get mentioned any more than that. But it was just how natural and, effortless it was to just take a woman into a command position.
Yeah, Nichelle Nichols played a crucial role in that. It was perfectly natural for Nichelle Nichols to assume a role that was traditionally a male role.
That show was very, very inspirational, very, very key.
Yeah, a lot of little morality plays were sort of woven into the scripts.
That's what's good about science fiction, by the way. You can ask those what if questions and pose what if answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the aliens could have whatever behavior you want them to have to model whatever you're trying to say.
Yeah.
So can science fiction books model the ideas we were talking about today? Where
In principle, yes, but I don't know that they're terribly
decades ago.
successful.
Hmm.
I mean, Umberto Eco, Stanislaw Lem. I mean, there are some really good examples of science fiction or fantasy fiction that are enlightening. But since I never read very much fiction, I couldn't give you lots of examples.
Well, let me cite you another one. Okay, one of the very earliest science fiction series, which I still consider one of the greatest ever written. Okay, was written, I believe, in the 50s, if not earlier, by Edward E. Doc Smith, who is, by the way, I think a chemist or chemical engineer. And he posits this very advanced civilization called Arigia. But the game that is common to the Erysian civilization is something they call the visualization. In other words, they try to see how many centuries or millennia they can predict the future, model the future. That's the game to them.
Mhm.
So in fact, it encompasses all the best thinking about modeling, critical thinking, scientific thinking, et cetera, what if thinking, all of that. And one of their results is they can see these two galaxies coming together, and they say millions of years from now, these galaxies are going to collide. So since they are advanced beings, they send virtual scouts to this second galaxy, and they discover there's another equally ancient civilization in that second galaxy, as old as the Erysians, but they're very hierarchical, power hungry, mean, et cetera, right? All the classic dynamics of how you set up drama. So they say, millions of years from now, how are we going to deal with this issue? Because the second civilization was not yet aware of the first generation. So the first generation went into hiding. And it evolved a set of other, let's say, child civilizations who could be prepared to take on this challenge of this intergalactic strife. Anyway, that's the setup. I'm not going to say any more than that. But to me, it had such grand ideas. I've not seen such grand ideas at that level in such scope.
Yeah.
In almost any other series.
Mm. Now, would you say it's a similar problem to before, like hundreds of years ago, people would send sailing ships to explore new lands and they'd meet people they'd never seen before. So would you say it's a similar type problem? Or
yeah, it's a similar concept to that, but that's not the key. That's not a crucial idea in this.
okay.
Okay? It's kind of a
preparing to
it's incidental.
yeah, okay, so it's
Well,
like
idea.
generational planning.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, because there are theories that you'll have these generational spaceships and they'll grow up on the ship and then
Yeah, the Native Americans were not prepared to receive the Europeans.
mhm.
And by the way, the most preeminent member of this advanced society, the Erysian Society, was actually a 5-member entity. It was actually not an individual. It was a 5-member entity, and those entities together fused their minds, quote unquote.
A committee. It was a committee.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they were basically the ultimate collaborologists.
Yeah, committee. Not an autocracy, but a committee. Not a hierarchy, but a committee.
Anyway, I still read those almost every decade. I go back and reread that series. It's so entertaining to me. Just for reference, just to be complete, it's called the Lensman series. There's about 5 or 6 books in that series. The last book is really not in the same line of story, but it's part of that universe. The first book is called Triplanetary.
Yep. So look at the quality we had decades ago and what happened to all that quality, music, art, everything.
Yeah. We've got more limited, more depressed, more pessimistic.
Yeah. More worried. Yeah, more anxiety.
We used to be optimistic about, hey, I love this person. We're gonna spend our lives together. Beautiful ballads about that. Now it's like I'm depressed. I'm in my truck. I'm going to the lake. I'm about to blow my brains out.
And there's not going to be any Messiah to come along and solve all our problems for us. We're going to have to figure it out ourselves. I mean, millennia ago, everybody thought, oh, there's going to be a Messiah who's going to come along, some smart dude is going to come along and solve it all for us. And It's not going to happen in the 21st century. I would be very surprised. Unless the Messiah is the AI, which could be, theoretically, it could be the AI is the one who figures it all out.
Actually, I thought Donald J. Trump was the Messiah. That's what the evangelicals would have you believe.
You know, if he gets into power, it'll be the messianic era. The messianic era instead of the messianic era. But that'll be interesting if the AI turns out to be the one, the entity who figures it all out for us and somehow convinces us to mend our ways.
Yeah.
Not inconceivable. It's one of those. You could write a sci-fi story to that effect, I suppose.
And others have. And I've also said one of the benefits of AI is that it actually presents a higher floor of competence on almost every knowledge-based task, almost every knowledge-based work job.
Instead of a superhero coming along like Superman, it'll be the super brain comes along, the disembodied super brain.
Let's see, I think AI would be useful to find the links that we don't see. So like I asked it, okay, where else is Ted Nelson's research being done? And yeah, there's places in Australia, there are places around the world that could research when I have the time. Yeah.
Are places still extending Xanadu?
I don't know what's happened. There was a prototype and the developer just burned out and quit. So it stayed a prototype. But with Frode, he's looking at these AR models, and it's possible you could have something in AR that is Xanadu-like.
Mhm.
But the underlying structure, I believe, can be done easily on a decentralized web.
That's why one of the first things I wanted to do was take a DKR and add another D to it. The DD,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
distributed DKR.
Yep.
Library of Alexandria, the DKR.
It wasn't D, the first D. I'm not sure how dynamic it was.
Well, I'm sure it added volumes from time to time.
Well, you know how they did it? As ships came in, they made them give up all their books to make a copy of their books.
Good way to do it.
Mhm.
Too bad it got destroyed. Remind me, who destroyed it?
Didn't it just burn down? I thought it burned down. Siri, how did the Library of Alexandria get destroyed?
The library, part of its collection, was accidentally burned by Julius Caesar during his civil war in 48 BC, but it is unclear how much was actually destroyed, and it seems to have either survived or been rebuilt shortly thereafter. This is from Wikipedia.
Well, therefore, it's God's truth is from Wikipedia.
So another thing to blame Julius for.
It accidentally burned by it. I don't think anything he did was accidental.
Nope. By the way, I did come across a 1 hour or 90-minute documentary on Alexander this past week. It's fascinating. Also about his father, by the way, that it turns out they were not actually Greeks. They're from Macedonia. And yet he's identified as, building the Greek Empire all the way out to India. And
Aristotle was also from Macedonia.
Yeah, and it's interesting that they care.
Everyone's Albanian.
What? I didn't hear that.
Everyone's
I
Albanian.
said everyone's Albanian. Tesla's Albanian. John Belushi's Albanian. Alexander. What is it? The lady that helped all the kids in India.
Oh, Mother Teresa and Donald Trump.
Mother Teresa, Albanian. All Albanian, Macedonian.
The Albanians of our existence.
You're full of puns today, Barry.
I used to do puns all the time. I hardly do them anymore.
No, they're good. They're good today. The messianic era,
The messy antic era.
messy antic.
I think part of the problem is my vocabulary recall is declining, and so puns don't come to mind like they used to.
I don't know. You're pretty sharp today.
Well, for an old man, maybe.
And one of the questions I still come across too often is, how did we move these 2,000-ton concrete blocks thousands of years ago?
Oh, that's the bane of my existence, Sam. I've been trying to figure that out my whole life.
Love to find out how they did that.
I think there was a movie where they tried to explore that. Was it a Werner Herzog movie?
There are theories, it's just that they don't really know how to rule them in and out.
Mhm.
Well, the only thing I can gather is they just had a different technology. It's not linear. They were smart. In other words, the culture that created and did those things from Pumapunku to Olante Tumbo, so on and so forth, all the way to Derinkuyu to Gobekli Tepe. I mean, if you've ever gone down this rabbit hole, you'll find them all the way in Wyoming. There's walls that are stacked up in Americas.
Yeah.
So there must have been some sort of civilization that was way more advanced. And who knows what year it was. I mean, could have been 50,000, could have been 200,000, could have been, who knows? Like, we don't know. No one
Right.
can tie, all the archaeologists can't figure this out.
Even this past week, I just came across another quote unquote video or documentary about how the Sphinx, the face on the Sphinx, was actually reconstructed after it was originally destroyed. So the Sphinx face, according to this documentary, is not the original face of the Sphinx.
I've been, have you guys been there? Have any of you guys
No.
been to Egypt? You can see it clearly. It's not the original face when you go.
It's still have a broken nose.
Yeah, but the Sphinx isn't even, I mean, the Sphinx is amazing in some regards, but the Karnak temple, I don't know. I mean, that doesn't get talked about enough. The pillars are so big.
Yep.
And you can see these hallways where there was over 800 of these pillars, and that's not including the 40 or 50 obelisks that are perfectly smooth, etched to precision. It just doesn't make sense. It's just not logical. It's like
We can build those things today if we tried, right?
we could. I have stonemason friends in Ventura, California. They run a little, you can etch those things in. It's
But
possible.
how do we move those tens of thousands of tons concrete blocks? How do we move them? See, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
The best guess I can have is there was some sort of sound vibration, like think of Roman concrete, self-healing kind of concrete, and some sort of, if you put a sound wave through this type of concrete, or maybe it's light, maybe it's sound, it will seal and turn into a type of rock. It's a pressure wave that they pour it and it turns into that, and then they carve it. And that same type of rock was found at a quarry somewhere where they say, oh, okay, that's where they quarried it from. And in some time frames they did, but not when it was originally created, if that makes sense.
So you think a kind of cement where it was a,
Well, that's the material itself, but then how do you move it?
well, you can move cement a bucket at a time in small amounts, and
Well, they would have poured it, yeah.
yeah.
But some of it is not as obvious because the other side of that is sitting right there in a block, in a quarry, like in Aswan in India. I mean, Egypt. But the one that blows my mind is the one where they just carved straight down and it's one solid piece, the entire complex.
Mhm.
But it baffles. I mean, that's the reason why I talk like a crazy person, that ancient cultures were way, way smarter. And if you go into the quote unquote mythology, they explain it all.
The Antikythera mechanism reveals
Yeah.
how advanced people were to build that orrery clock that they found in this Antikythera
Yeah.
ship.
But who told that first lie that the ancient people were not as advanced as we are? Who started that rumor, that
I think
narrative?
it's just an assumption.
Right. But who started it?
That I couldn't tell you.
Probably a king
Yeah.
or someone in power.
Yeah. Isn't that what they always do though, to look smarter? It's like, oh, those people didn't know. They don't know what they're doing. I'm the boss here. I'm the one that'll tell you what it is.
Either the king or the church. Have you heard of the Isle of Yap, the big stones? Okay.
Yap? No.
Yeah, that's the first blockchain. They had these big ledgers on stone where they could chisel in who owns what, and exchange of transactions.
That's where we get payment from. Yap spelled backwards is to pay.
Yeah, probably.
You just unlocked it, Barry.
Secret of the universe. Yeah.
No combinatory needed.
No, just reverse it.
Yeah.
Put it upside down.
And what was proof of work?
How many scars you got as you chiseled?
Are any of you guys following the blockchain, ether, lightning technology stuff?
Not me.
Are you following it, Eric? No.
Been away
Yeah, me
from it.
neither.
We know blockchain came down to what, 56,000 per, sorry, Bitcoin came down to 56,000 last week.
Haven't heard.
Yeah, there's a lot of movement in the economic world last week.
Sabina Hassenfelder has been devoting a few episodes to the energy cost of mining Bitcoin and why that's a constraint that's often overlooked.
Yeah, but we've known that for years. We always knew that was what's going to keep it from really spreading. Afford Bitcoin.
Yeah, but the aficionados tend to overlook that.
In that Cory Doctorow article I posted, he says that ransomware is what gives Bitcoin its liquidity. So why is the world like that? Ransomware is needed for
Sex, power, and money will make you root of all evil. You know, love of money is root of all evil. There's a lot of evil in money grubbing.
Yes, that's why I brought up Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. So you take away the need for sex, and then what happens?
You have to find something else to get joy out of.
Yeah, that's why they need the Soma drug.
It's also an issue of aging, is finding things that give you any pleasure when the things that used to give you pleasure are too costly in terms of human faculties and resources as you age.
Well, the other phenomenon is whatever your pleasure, quote unquote, is, if it's too easy and too readily available,
It's not pleasurable.
eventually you get bored of it and you see something else.
It's otiose. It's
You need a new kink. That's the problem.
banal, becomes banal. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt.
But so long as people are still operating under a zero-sum world and they think in terms of inadequacy,
I
then
think that's why we look for the next big thing, the next new thing to get excited about, at least for a little while. Sometimes you find the next big thing just as you're coming of age and becomes your career, and you ride that train until you retire.
So what are some alternatives? Like they're more Eastern style lifestyles that catching on? I don't know.
Well, Buckminster Fuller already said decades ago, we don't have to operate in this world of scarcity.
Mhm.
And then secondly, we don't have to operate in this world of me. I first.
I mean, it could be the storytelling. I think there's a lot of evidence that storytelling is in a new golden age, because you can make a living doing storytelling and you can entertain people with stories when they got nothing better to do with their life. They don't have to farm the land or do labor so that they'll consume stories. So I think, the storytelling culture probably still has quite a long ways to go before we run out of innovative stories to amuse and enlighten people with.
That's why Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Paramount and Disney and all those
Absolutely. Yeah.
lots of money.
Both the technology and the creativity of storycraft.
And that's the sad part about it, because who was it? Somebody is known for making this quote. If we got everybody in the country to just spend a weekend, just 2 days, contributing to the common knowledge, writing whatever they know, that's essentially the level of effort that went into Wikipedia.
Yeah. But a lot of that will be banal.
But I'm talking about, just how much wastage we see because
Oh, yeah.
people have that motivation. They don't
Yeah.
have that sense of contribution.
Well, if you really try to make a contribution, the big worry is that you'll write something and you'll discover that it wasn't original. Somebody else got there first. You didn't know.
Keep it going, it'll eventually aggregate nicely.
Maybe if you have enough originality, you'll eventually come up with something that's original, novel, interesting, valuable, useful.
And it's all necessary. Each PhD student has to go through the prior work.
Yep. That's why I once asked some journalists how they got to be such good storytellers. And they said they devoured all the literature they could in their formative years. And that's how they got to be good at storycraft.
Readers make thinkers.
It also explains why I'm not very good, because I didn't devour all the literature in a liberal arts education.
Ask what you just said, Sam. You said meters make thinkers. I didn't hear that.
Readers.
What makes
Readers make thinkers.
readers? Okay, sorry, I didn't hear you. I was like, meters make thinkers. Oh, what does that mean?
And AIs do a
readers.
lot of reading. LLMs do an enormous amount of reading, and they can generate prose, which is comparable. It just doesn't necessarily have to be the ground truth. It can be fantasy prose, just made up stuff that's well written, poetic, amusing, but it doesn't have to be the ground truth.
Now, a writer usually goes through a process of revising and revising until they're happy with it. An AI doesn't do that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sure it does. Your
Well-
AI doesn't do that? Don't you have it sent to an Excel spreadsheet and have it loop around and ask it to keep rewriting? Come on, Eric.
You
I
can
have,
keep
evidence
prompting it.
I have evidence to show that it doesn't. Get stuck in a loop. It keeps saying the same thing over and over again, no matter what you present to it to dispel what it just said. It just keeps saying it over and over again. Doesn't know any better.
Yeah, eventually they'll become schizophrenic AIs talking to themselves, walking around the streets.
Well, when
So
they
confused.
try to become self-consistent, I mean, really be rigorous about avoiding, inconsistency, then you'll see the next upgrade. And I guess they even have a term for that in LLMs, the self-consistency requirement, how hard that is to do.
It's amazing that we're even close to having some sort of system that works anything like a neuron, because the neurons in our bodies and our brains, and they're quite remarkable. I mean, the fact that we're even getting close to that is amazing.
And there's still much to a real neuron that we haven't yet modeled in AI.
Yeah. They have
Yeah.
features that are not in the simple. I wrote a piece of code to do Little Red Riding Hood's brain. It only had 6 neurons. And I did it in the 90s. That was just to sort of understand a little bit about what can a basic neural network do. And it can instantiate Little Red Riding Hood's brain quite nicely. But real neurons are not like those very simple neurons that add up a bunch of inputs and compare them against a threshold and either fire or don't fire. That was your basic elementary neuron. I sum, therefore I think.
Yeah, there's so many ways to fire a neuron. Like Stan was talking about, abacus was the first military use. Like, what was the first person that learned how to protect the group? You know, like they're just, I don't know. I'm fascinated by the brain. I listen to all these brain scientists talk about how they're firing, and I don't know if you guys are following Michael Levin's work at Tufts University on he's learning how to program biological computers with signals and noise inside of the cell and inside of the biology itself. And a lot of it is just asking for cooperation from groups of cells. So I think that's what's going on. Is there's, you know, a signal gets sent out, and whoever picks up that signal, whether it be an individual cell or, you know, a biochemical reaction, much like just pure chemistry, not biology, then that signals to the rest of the group to do something. And then it goes on different scales in your body, all the way to the scale of individual humans, just like ants, where they're getting these chemical signals and they're programmed to do a certain thing.
It's like a Bose-Einstein condensate. It's a little regime where everything lines up because that's the lowest energy state, that one of them becomes the leader and all the others line up. And that's
I mean,
between a Bose-Einstein condensate.
look at politics. That's it works in that
Exactly. You know, that you line up with the leader, or else you're on the outs with that cult. You either join the cult or you don't join the cult.
Yeah, that colony of bacteria might kill that other colony of bacteria, so you better line up with the right colony.
And you get the tiger with its stripes and leopard with its spots. You get the competing colonies with different orientations. But and some of us take the road less traveled.
Yeah, has anyone ever modeled every layer of groupthink from the micro to from the smallest to the largest, the micro to the macro?
I don't know. Might be a research thing in psychology, maybe. I don't know.
I've never seen it in psychology. Maybe it's there.
Well, a lot of stuff is missing from psychology. I mean, the model of emotions and learning wasn't in the literature when I came up with it. So there's your evidence that it wasn't an incomplete body.
Or maybe we just haven't completed the dynamic knowledge repository of all of the cultures that ever existed on this planet yet. Maybe that's the first step.
Or it's scattered and it's not in one search spot. It's, you know, you have to go to some obscure place on the planet to find out some culture that's not replicated in anybody else's library.
Or it's being purposely suppressed from us, so we can't find out.
Yeah, that too. Or just that it's untranslated or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just untranslated. There was a famous TED talk about a guy searching for I think it was a parrot, and it was he came up with this thing in Brazil, but what it means in one culture isn't in another culture. So you have to know the culture in order to search for that thing, not just the language, but how the format, the context of that string to receive that search prompt back. And then you have to be searching when you're searching the web, you're only searching a fraction of it.
Reingold wrote a book called There's a Word for It. And he found words in one language that only were in that language that didn't have a direct translation of others. And he's got this whole book full of words that you only find in one language. And you have to use you have to import the foreign word. Schadenfreude was, I think, one of the examples that we don't really have a lot of words we don't have a direct translation. Yiddish is full of words we don't have direct translations in the more general languages. So. What was the one? Moquita. Moquita was a word in I think some tribal language that, oh, the truth that everybody knows but never speaks aloud. That's what Mokita meant.
What is Lokita? Is that a Native
Mokita
American
with an
language?
M. Mokita, the truth that everybody knows but never mentions aloud. And so,
Hmm.
Mokita would be the name of the elephant in the room. If you had an elephant in the room, what would you call it? Mokita. You know, the elephant in the room that everybody knows is there but never mentions.
The emperor has no clothes.
Exactly. I created an avatar named Mokita Syzygy. And for a while, I used the avatar name Mokita Syzygy. Because syzygy is another word it's in astronomy when you get a lineup, but almost nowhere else will you find the word syzygy, because it's a kind of a technical word.
So do we need to create new languages in order to move forward to find the primer that ties all of the knowledge together?
Well, we certainly invented some mathematical and computer languages,
Mm-hmm.
logical languages, Boolean algebras and whatnot. The thing is those languages are harder to learn than spoken. Spoken languages are a lot easier to learn than symbolic languages. We really are behind the 8 ball on symbolic languages, of which I think like the lambda calculus and combinatorial languages are very obscure and arcane and sort of absent from our popular culture.
Yeah, I was in a music room last night, and a guy was playing guitar. Another guy wanted to jam with him, so he played guitar, but his guitar was a little out of tune and out of whack on his. So he switched to a thing called the Linstrument and started playing a saxophone on a Linstrument to the guitar, which made a lot of dissonance, but it was quite the jam.
Yeah.
And before we even did that, we were playing AI. We were making up songs for people in the room and playing the AI music in different styles, reggae to country. And everyone was like, "Oh, it sounds like a computer." I was like, "Because it is a computer."
It's like elevator music. You know, Kurt Swile wrote code to generate musical themes, and it was elevator music. It was musical, but it wasn't Mozart.
Oh, have you played with this yet? Have any of you guys played with Suno? Suno? It's mind blowing. Like in terms of 30 seconds, it'll write. You can give it any 200 character prompt, and it will write it. You can even upload now licks of music if you play, and it will incorporate that into. It's getting really good on the music front.
Okay.
Like really good, like melodies, full lyrics. I told it to make the chorus. This person loves that person, and it put in the names in rhyme and meter to that and sang it in that style.
Any can do music better than I can, because I can't do music with a damn.
No, but I'm just saying, like melody wise, it's been fed so many songs. It can really nail it at some.
And it knows the names of all the genres and examples of all the genres. So.
And you can ask one like Claude or Perplexity or one of the other ones to write the lyrics, or the other one to put it into the melodic tone, and then you can ask it to clean it up and do the drums a certain way, and it's really amazing. It's probably, I would say, 2.5 years away from being studio quality where you cannot tell the difference at all.
Well, I wouldn't be able to tell
just a prompt,
because I'm not a music aficionado, so I can tell if it's elevator music because it's music and it's not terribly interesting, but it's not cacophonous either.
Yeah.
You see, I've used a program called Band in a Box, which is from the 90s. And what that is, it's you put in the chords you want and you pick a style, and it has an algorithm that will play in that style to your chords. So that's not AI, but I found that was very useful for me for practicing, for just even creating background tracks to play along with. So yeah, it's been around.
I remember years ago, somebody would try to finish the unfinished symphony. And I suppose AIs could do that straight away these days. They could finish any of the numbers of unfinished symphonies. And you wouldn't be able to tell. where the original was and where the extension begins, unless you were totally knowledgeable about it.
There's
Yeah,
a
I was
piece by
questioning-
Bach from his deathbed. It was unfinished because he died.
Yeah, didn't Schubert have a famous unfinished symphony?
Number 8.
Yeah, I remember some guy, giving a talk on finishing an unfinished symphony and challenge the audience to figure out where the transition was.
Hmm.
But he was using statistics. He was basically replicating the statistical style of the music, everything about the original pattern he was keeping, and that's how he finished the unfinished symphony. Your AI could do that pretty quick today.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the Chinese culture is more apt to make better algorithms just because one of their favorite games is Go. They're playing the combinatory logic of Go is readily on the minds of a lot of people because they're playing that game a lot.
Yeah, my feeling is that anybody who really masters the mathematics of combinatorial logic is going to have a leg up in terms of a career in the 21st century, because people are so poor at it, trying to do it haphazardly.
If we played Go, if Go became the national pastime of America, that would change everything.
Yeah, but I don't think that's likely to happen. It's a very hard game.
Sudoku became pretty popular. They sell Sudoku toilet paper.
Uh,
You never know. Like, you never know what becomes popular in the next generations. Like 2 generations from now, that might be all the rage.
What makes Sudoku interesting is not the original Sudoku, but the generalized Sudoku, where they add extra rules to depart from the original version of Sudoku. Almost all of the ones they do on the Sudoku solving channels are the ones that involve these extra rules that make it a much richer kind of problem to work on. More involved logic than the classical Sudoku logic.
Yeah, I have this theory that the media wants you to believe that, like, I just watched the top 10 movies coming out this year, the big blockbuster movies, and I think I counted 7 of the 10 were all nightmares and fears and horror and just absolute scare the shit out of you movies.
And not love stories. Somebody pointed out on public radio the decline of love as a theme in popular music. It's basically, I won't say totally gone, but it's really faded. And a lot of popular music is not love stories anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that opposite projection kind of psychology where when cultures are doing really well, they want to see people doing bad. When people are doing really bad, they want to see people doing really well. So if there's no fear in society, you've got to pump the fear in because it's the opposite of what they see on their day to day, which will lead them to go into the movies to watch the scary thing when there's not a lot of fear in your day to day life. So it's sometimes a nice calibration of where societies are by what narratives are popular.
Remember the year of the disaster movies? There was a decade where all the big hits were disaster movies.
Yeah, the asteroids hitting and it was late 90s, maybe.
I forget
Well,
what
that was
80s or 90s.
wasn't that the 2000 crisis was looming in the popular culture, and then after that it was the 2012. There's always a
2012.
What is it? Every 10 years, I guarantee. What is it? It's 2024. So probably in the next. Oh, actually, it's already coming up. There's an asteroid coming close to the Earth. What, 2026?
One just went by last week.
Yeah, that's I'm just saying that it's really easy to manipulate culture if you know where the needle is pointing. Like we've all forgotten waking up every morning, checking CNN to see what the threat level is. Do you guys remember that? That was our day-to-day lives for about 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Threat level, it's yellow. Okay, let's go to the mall. Oh shit, it's orange. It's orange. Leave the mall. Oh fuck. Threat level 5.
The threat is coming from inside the house now.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Coming from
I'm,
inside.
yeah. I just watched, have you guys seen, there was a famous documentary that went around YouTube called Loose Change.
Yeah, a long time ago I watched it.
Long time. There was another guy that did like a short condensed version of that, but with a lot of satire and comedy,
Mhm.
just to show how ridiculous the narrative that they pumped to the culture of 9/11. Like, oh, they just happened to found the passport that fell out of the sky 2 blocks away from the Trade Center. And they just happened to have $2.3 trillion missing on a press conference on September 10th. And that exact department that was supposed to keep New York safe, it was controversial, but they just decided to put that in the World Trade Center, the emergency department of. It's just like there's so many things that were just coincidence, but they're so ridiculous when you with anyone with a logical brain, it makes no sense. You know, like an hour and a half of these planes going off course. Our military had no way to scramble a plane to blow them out of the sky. And everyone just accepts that narrative like, oh no, we didn't know. We had no idea.
Well, the fact that military screw up is it's an old repeating story in history. Military screw up. That's
Yeah,
seen time.
yes, but they didn't screw up last week over in Iran when there was close calls. They didn't screw up the week before that. I'm just saying the military that blew all those missiles that were being fired at Israel about 2 months ago, 3 months ago, those didn't screw up. Only one did. I think they missed one.
Well, yeah, and if you miss one, that's considered a win for the other side.
Right, but I'm saying that level of accuracy, how do you account for that not screwing up? Like if you can track a piece of paint from NORAD in space, a little paint chip going around the Earth, but you can't track a plane coming from Boston?
It's not that you can't track it, is that can you fire a missile that fires without error? You know, that everything works perfectly because you can shoot at something and miss. If you know anything can cause a miss, a slight error in the initial measurement or something. If the measurement is off, you know, by a
Right,
little.
but shouldn't those jets be flying next to that plane as it makes that giant circle that goes down to the level of the buildings? Like in other words,
Maybe.
and yeah, I'm just saying from people that were there on the ground, meaning my sister standing on the building after the first plane hit, there were 2 fighter jets that flew overhead before the second plane hit.
Oh.
And if you were there,
I'm not a
yeah,
military strategist, so I don't think I could give you a plausible answer to what's realistic and what's blunderous in military combat. All I know is that military combat is full of blunders.
well, that's an easy way to dismiss it. But military combat's also full of a lot of precision.
The whole idea is to get precision without that, avoid the blunders where the blunder isn't just a near miss or a near hit, but you know, not some kind of really stupid mistake.
Right, but we have military nuclear submarines armed with missiles, and how many have gone off in the last 30 years?
I don't know if any.
By mistake.
Probably none. Don't really know.
But on that particular day, it was all mistakes. I'm just logic. I'm just saying logically, but no one wants to look into that because it's scary.
Or if they do look into it, it's all top secret reporting. It's not published.
There are probably layers of disinformation covering up the truth there.
Yeah, well, they're all laid out to see. If you just draw a little notebook and you start putting all the disinformation and then read the 9/11 commission report and you go down the line of reality next to it, nothing matches up.
There was a good movie, I think it was on Netflix, called Worth, about the lawyer who had to do the settlements for the 9/11 families. very good story, and it gets you insight into that profession of how do you value a life, and why is this firefighter's life less or more important than someone else's life in terms of the money that they had to settle, because they had to value these people. It's very sickening, but
Yeah, I'm still angry just because I studied psychology and I know that the first slogan that came out after 9/11 was "We will never forget,"
Mhm.
and it's only 23 years later, and we all forgot.
9/11
that
is
was the
not
thing.
like Tisha B'Av. It could have been like Tisha B'Av, but but the Jews seem to remember every calamity in history, but Americans can't.
Maybe that's the Jewish DNA in me because I'm not forgetting.
It's coming up in August, so let's be ready.
Well, I'm saying, what's going to be the celebration? Are we going to go back through and relive the whole thing and not forget? And are we going to pay honor to all the people that died? And are we going like?
We have
I don't remember.
every
Yeah.
year we have ceremonies. That's what we do. Yeah. I mean, the families get together, but yeah, practically in the consciousness. I don't even know if it's taught in schools.
I don't see it taught in schools.
Mhm.
They don't. You can even go on YouTube and they take off a lot. If you every year I go and I search for 9/11 video,
Right.
and there's less and less every year.
Mhm.
Oh yeah,
They're taking it off the internet.
25 years ago or
So,
23 years ago.
yeah. So didn't George Orwell predict this, that you'll be scrubbing, your job will be, yeah, changing the past on the internet?
Well, you just looked up the Library of Alexander, and what that said compared to what the people in Egypt that I talked to said was a completely different narrative from Wikipedia's entry.
You know, Wikipedia will give you a possible plausible explanation, but you can't take it as the ground truth. You've got to use it as a starting point for deeper dive. It's not the end of
Yeah.
the story.
Right, but how many people have that patience to do that deep dive?
Somebody,
Yeah,
almost somebody. And the people who do the deeper dive, by the time they publish it, nobody pays attention to it anyway. It's too arcane.
Well, people pay attention to it. It just doesn't pick up the speed because there's gatekeepers that control information.
Yeah. Catch and kill.
Like I just watched a guy say he was talking about COVID during the first year that COVID happened, and he got 2 strikes on YouTube for talking about COVID. And the third one, he just talked about science. He didn't say anything about COVID. He was just talking about regular science, and they took him off of YouTube just for talking about mainstream science because it wasn't the narrative that was being pushed. And if you don't believe me, go research the Twitter files that came out. And there were multiple different journalists that did exposés on the Twitter files, and they'll show you all the names of all of the departments in the United States government that were consulting with Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google, so on and so forth.
Propaganda and propaganda, misinformation, disinformation, top secrets, national secrets.
Well, literally just taking people off the platform.
Yeah.
yes,
And you can try it yourself. You can do the experiment right now. You can go on YouTube, create a YouTube channel, start talking about a specific thing, and see what happens.
If you talk about math, you can talk about it forever. You'll have a tiny, tiny audience.
Like, I just think people need to wake up and just realize this whole idea of democracy. I mean, we all know how when someone wants to become the president of the United States, they have to get delegates and they have to have AKA super delegates. And a lot of those things are done in the party before even the primaries or the general election.
it's
They're
all about
voted on by
money.
a small group of people,
Oh yeah,
make that decision for the whole, and then they lie to the people and say, who are you going to vote for? I wonder if they're going to be, they already know.
Yeah. Well, Lesterland, where it's the primaries that really determine who's on the ballot, and
Yeah.
If you control the primary, then the general election is irrelevant.
And they controlled the primary.
It's all about how much money they could raise by this specific reporting date. And then that sets the tone, the agenda, the polls and everything.
But why lie to the general populace and say, if you vote for this person, then democracy will go away, when they already took democracy away? And it's been proven that we don't live in a democracy.
Well, first of all, we live in a republic, which is not the same as a democracy.
Thank you.
But I'm not real convinced that the republic is living up to what Plato had in mind.
It's not even a republic.
What would you call it, Sam?
It's called republic, but
It's close to a corrupt plutocracy.
Jimmy Carter.
That's what I call it.
Jimmy Carter came out and said it's become an oligarchy. And he said that must have been more than a decade ago. The U.S. is
Oligarchy as a term is still too weak. Oligarchy just means group. Plutocracy implies that the power is in the money.
Yeah,
I think it's clear that it's a plutocracy. I don't see anything that's not as clear as that.
You get citizens united there, you get corporations able to vote, or not vote, but express their political desires. It's a plutocracy just by those two alone.
and therefore it's probably unsustainable. But the question is, how and when is it going to fall? I don't know how to predict that, but
It will
if
not
it's sustainable, it's going to
It has
fall.
to be only revolution will get rid of this. It will not fall because too much power is already compiled into the legal system right now.
But if you control the minds, how can you have a revolution if you're not even allowed to congregate and meet?
That's right. You cannot even start a revolution because the information available to the masses is not available.
Yeah, I tried to start a revolution. We got pepper sprayed and we got infiltrated by government operatives that threw bricks through the window, that punched holes into, store windows and pretended to be us. And we caught them. We exposed them. We showed that they were CIA operatives. We told them who their names were. We could tell who their boots were. That's how we got them. They had this fucking military boots on, idiots. Like, we knew who was who. We exposed them, put it out into the media, and everyone said, "Oh no, those are the kids. They're lying. That's not CIA operatives." I mean, I watched in my lifetime the peaceable assembly go away. In 2013, you don't have the right to peaceably assemble unless you apply for a permit. And if you do that, then you can peaceably assemble. Just make sure you leave by 8 o'clock.
Although you can assemble on the internet.
No, you can't. You can't. They'll take the server down. It's even easier. I've tried. Trust me, I've gone
Internet
on.
doesn't need a central server. You can have peer-to-peer.
You can, but then you've got, let's just say you can assemble 6,000 people. Only 60 of those can get to the right server in the right time. I've tried that too. Doesn't work.
I mean, BitTorrent is a distributed server, so there is examples of, like, BitTorrent is an example of distributed, no single server. You have to have a seed. You have to have an original seed, but if the seed is sort of arcane, obscure, nobody knows about it. You have to have a little bit of distribution before they find out, and then once it's out there, it's out there.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a whiny conspiracy theorist, but at the same time, we lost our democracy a while ago.
Well, we never had one. I mean, at best, we only had a republic. If we can keep it, said Franklin. I gave you a republic if you can keep it, ma'am.
Yep.
Yeah, well,
and the answer don't seem to be keeping it. We seem to be losing it to an autocracy, oligarchy, plutocracy, whatever alternative you want to label it. Chaocracy.
Well, if you guys want to read a book called Chaos, it's a 20-year study of the MK Ultra program, Roger West, and how they turned the peaceful hippie movement in the 60s into baby killers and Charles Manson. And you can read the whole story. And there's a second book coming out. It was a guy who wrote an article for The Atlantic, and he started doing some research. It was supposed to be a 3-week article turned into a 20-year book. And after that book was published, some of those departments actually closed down in California that were still running the program to the modern day. So you can read it. This is not folklore. This is fact of the MK Ultra program, which through the fora, you can get all the documents and see that this is not bullshit.
The revolution might come through the arts. The arts might be the medium of the revolution, more likely than.
No, they've got the arts locked out. Barry, do you know what the #1 hit song is now?
You haven't a clue.
Charlie XOXO, and it's "Fuck Me," fuck me.
Is it a rap song? It's a rap song.
It's like gay techno. It's crap. It's terrible. I'm just saying that is the number. That's what they're pumping into the kids' heads. Is it's not. They control the art. The hip hop movement was one of the biggest movements, and it was getting towards peace of the East Coast and the West Coast hip hop artists coming together and making songs called Unity and Come Together. And then they pumped the songs that were F the police and screw you, gangster, gangster, fuck your bitch, fuck you, ho, drink gin, and smoke weed every day. And that was what was pumped to. And that still persists to this day. Gucci Mane.
This is not new. This has been going on for decades.
For millennials. I mean, they always do this.
Pre-millennial.
Yeah.
Thing is, I don't pay that much attention to popular music at my age anymore. I mean, I know about Taylor Swift. I know that was it the Rolling Stones put out a new album, and there's this new Beatles album from unpublished material. There's a lot of Bon Jovi's got a new album coming out or came out. But a lot of reprise. That's the stuff I hear about, is the reprising of stuff that's been around for decades.
Yeah.
The new stuff, the rap stuff, I don't follow.
Where I'm coming from with this passionate rant is the idea that if we don't protect in a dynamic knowledge repository enough information for future generations to have their revolution, even if it takes 4 generations from now, there needs to be some sort of grasp of information that can spark that in a future time.
You know, and in enough languages so that people can get it in more than one language, and not just spoken language, but mathematical, symbolic languages as well. There's textual languages and artistic languages, musical languages, physical languages.
Yeah, and maybe it will come from the AI. Someone will reprogram the algorithms inside of the robots to start that revolution where the robot goes, "Hey, come here."
AI
want to say
can
this,
be
but
a Rosetta Stone that can represent things in more than one language. Sort of keep the structure, the pattern, and represent the pattern in multiple representations, text and pictures and music and whatever.
Yeah, well, I'm watching ChatGPT get programmed to act and behave in a very specific, calculated way. I mean, it's daily. They're putting the guardrails. Each new iteration is having more and more guardrails put around it.
Yeah, to avoid spreading of misinformation, disinformation, and just baloney, malarkey nonsense.
Or is it more to avoid liability?
Maybe that.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe that too.
Yeah. It's not spreading they don't care. They spread misinformation all day as long as that creates a better bottom line.
Well, or steers the ship of state onto the shoals.
Yeah, as long as the people don't complain that, hey, it discriminated against me, anything like that.
Well, I mean, there are artists who are worried that it's going to, upset the market for artwork.
Oh yeah, music too.
Yeah, and they may have a point there. On the other hand, maybe artists will figure out how to exploit it and make better art by teaming up with the AIs. For all I know, that's what they might do.
I wish it worked that way. As an artist myself, I don't see that happening. I watched an artist, a creator, the guy who created a Patreon, Jack, what's Conti, I think his name is. The Patreon creator.
Yeah.
He just did this passionate speech at South by Southwest this year, saying how the age of the followers is gone because of the TikTok algorithm. It used to be you click on something, it gets in your feed and you follow it. now you don't even get to curate your own feed as following different places. And so he's passionately trying to rectify that situation, but he can't. It's too late.
What I don't have the answer to is, as the social networks sort of fall by the wayside because they're becoming banal and annoying, what's going to supplant them as the focus of attention on the internet?
Bring your muse back for that.
Well, except the Muse is arcane text-based.
Yeah, I know it is. Yeah. So how do you make it more
No, it's
interesting?
got to be. It has to be multimedia, and I
Yeah.
don't know what the next multimedia. I mean, it could be virtual reality, possibly.
Well,
3D world.
I think it'll be a video game. That's I don't know if you know about the video game movement, but these new video games that are coming out, that's where the movements come from. Is
You'd be right that virtual reality is using, the technology of video games, making them accessible, ubiquitous, affordable, whatever. Maybe, I could see that probably happening as these graphic processors become ubiquitous and affordable.
But they'll be immersive 3D games,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'll have-
well, there are already.
I think they need to be interactive.
There's
Passively.
thousands of immersive 3D games right now that people are playing.
Yeah. Well, the Xboxes and I forget the names of all these technologies, but the Sony one, or whatever it's called, not Xbox. What's the one that Zelda's on?
PlayStation.
PlayStation, yeah, all these different.
But what if we created as a group a video game where the job of the video game was to create a knowledge repository, and you have to start collecting it, but you have to use real world data from the internet into the game?
That might be too much like work.
But people sit and do Farmville all day on the internet. I mean,
when Facebook first came out, we were playing those stupid games on Facebook. That's all there was on it, was the games. And they lasted about 5 years and then kind of faded.
no, actually, no, they're still going strong. There's what is it called? Stargazer. There's so many games where people are doing work and they don't even know it inside of the game.
Oh,
Like, just think of solving the ID for if this sign is a stoplight. Like when you're going to the path, that was a game that they did for people to log in, but that trained a lot of algorithms. Human training for AI. That was the mass group training of AI.
I just don't think I'm a good prognosticator anymore. I sort of lost track of where we might be going in technology in terms of the next big thing. I don't know what the next big thing is going to be.
From what I can see, it's the company Synthesia that created avatars. So the better the avatars get, the more we'll start to see them popping up on kiosks and websites, and it'll look just like a human, talk like a human. We'll know it's not a human, but that uncanny valley will start to get narrower and narrower, and then to the point where we won't know the difference.
Well, even stage performers, I mean, they put on costumes and makeup and they change their personality into that of a character. So, basically anybody can become a character that got synthetic appearance and synthetic voice and even synthetic scripting.
Yeah. Well, I try to follow the leaders, which is what's the number one company in the world, the most profitable company. That's Apple, and number 2 is Nvidia right now, and I think they're about to surpass them.
Yeah, between Alphabet, Meta, Apple, Nvidia, it's a tight race of the top 4 or 5 technology companies.
It's a tight race, but the person that owns the hardware usually
Amazon.
like Microsoft owned what was it? No, IBM owned the hardware and Microsoft owned the software.
Microsoft is bigger than IBM by a long shot. Yeah.
Maybe in terms of dollars, but in terms of businesses that use the software, what's the amount of people?
But, customers, the vast majority of machines are still running Microsoft Windows, so those are customers, those are individuals, so. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I'm
That's
just
the
saying, if you
problem.
watch the latest presentation by NVIDIA, by Jensen Wang, what's his name? I can't remember names anymore. The CEO of NVIDIA showed a picture of the latest AI face, and it has sweat and pores in the skin.
Very realistic, yeah.
And it's not going to work on this year's hardware, but it will work on 2 years from now hardware. It will work. You'll be able to see that created on your desktop computer.
Yeah, I probably won't be able to afford that when I'm 81 years old.
No, you will. It'll be cheap.
Think so, maybe.
Well, because they do this leasing thing. That's the way they got everyone to get iPhones. Is you don't actually own the iPhone. AT&T or T-Mobile or Verizon owns the phone. You're just leasing it, and it's rent to buy.
Or it might be in the cloud and it's not actually running on my hardware. It's running in the cloud and displaying on my hardware.
It's both. The Apple, they called it Apple Intelligence, but they have it on device, and then they have a personal, supposedly secure cloud that only you get to access.
But I'm not running an M1 machine. I'm running a 13-year-old or whatever, 12, 13-year-old machine. So
Right, but the government will issue one in a couple of years, so don't worry.
I doubt that. They're not going to issue me an NVIDIA processor.
Well, they're up to M4 now, so the M1 chip is going to be very, very cheap 2 years from now.
People start
You'll be able to
retiring them. When people start retiring them and giving them away to me so they don't go into the landfill, then I'll end up owning one.
That's next year. People will be getting rid of their
You think
M1s
people are
to get
gonna
the M5.
start not just selling them on eBay, but actually when they're ready for the landfill and they just want to get rid of them and don't want them to go
That'll
in.
be me next year, Barry. I'll say, you want my M1? Because I don't need it, because I have my
Yeah.
iPad is an M4.
I mean, I'm basically, this is a 2012 iMac I'm on. It's running Sonoma. It's running the latest version of Sonoma. The 2012 Mac.
Well, you can have my M1 in a couple of years when I upgrade.
All right, well, maybe when I'm 83 years old, I'll still
Yeah.
be interested in high-end computing applications. Who knows? I mean, I can't even prognosticate what's going to happen next week.
Yeah.
Right, guys, been fun.
Yeah, it's
Get
been
going.
Thank you, Eric.
2.5 hours, so.
Okay,
Be well.
yep, take it easy.
And Sam
Cheers.
dropped 2 already, so.
Can I ask you, Barry, was there anything interesting in the first hour that I missed?
Oh, let's see, do I have the AI companion running? Let's just see if that comes up anything. Where's the AI companion? Oh, summary, there it is. Oh, no, he never started it. Okay, he never started.
okay.
Companion. I thought he had it running.
I guess not. I didn't see it when I logged in.
I thought it was running, but I don't know. What did we talk about for the first hour? Well, let me go back to the chat. We talked about disruptive technologies and we argued over the meaning of disruptive. That was kind of banal.
Got it. Is Sam and Eric working on that old software program that they were trying to run?
They've been working, well, yeah, Eric's been working on, I don't even remember the name of it. They were talking about it in the last couple of weeks. That tends to be outside of my bailiwick, so I'm not really attending to that very diligently.
Okay.
But
I appreciate
of course, Sam has been putting these videos up. The last couple of videos, I think he put up yesterday's video yesterday. So, you know, since he's home today, he'll probably put today's up today too. And maybe the one from
Okay.
a week or 2 ago, he'll put up that I sent him in email. So your better thing is to wait till he puts it up and then go take a look at it and see what's in the transcript.
I wish I could magically share all my chip technology with you because there's just the amount of tools to play with right now are like everyone in my world is talking about WebSim AI, which is a prompt for JavaScript creation to make web apps.
Well, I mean, what I'm in the market for is content that's interesting, entertaining, modestly educational, that you don't have to do a lot of homework on.
Uh-huh.
And you know, worth you know, a better use of my time than any alternative.
Mm.
And that's a kind of, you know, it's a shrinking scope of attention.
Yeah, I'm where I'm at is I'm just waiting for the daily driver for most people to be just like when the app thing got popular, like there's an app for that and everyone was downloading from the PlayStation store, Sony, what is it, Google store and the iPhone store, apps that were changing society on a weekly basis. I'm waiting for those apps to be actual language models that get put into your daily computers, meaning your humanoid robots, your dishwasher, your car, the, you know, the things that are ubiquitous around you, your phone.
I mean, if there was something that could take the corpus of my published work, which is mostly text, blogs and things like that, and somehow turn them into works of art that were more accessible to the general public. But that would take a kind of expertise that's beyond my own scope of expertise. And maybe, you know, maybe in the next 5 years, the AIs could, you know, take the collected works of Barsoom Torque and turn them into something that would be, you know, not quite viral, but at least would reach a wider audience.
Well, could you do that with the amount of tokens that are in Gemini right now?
I have no idea.
Because I know they said they were going to launch, it was 1.5 million tokens to 2 million tokens. I don't know if they've launched that yet.
I mean, just last week or a week or two ago, when Julian Assange got released, I don't know if it was Gemini, I think it was Chat GPT. It couldn't even read the news reports. It wouldn't even read the websites of the New York Times and the Washington Post and NPR, and it wouldn't even digest anything until some minimum threshold. So I'm sure my stuff is so below the level of acceptable access to these things that it may be a long time before you know,
No, I think you're thinking they have to go to the web and scour and get it, but you could just upload it directly.
I gave them the URL. I gave them the actual URL to the New York Times story, the AP story, the NPR story.
No. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying, do you have a folder with all of your papers in it in text?
I have a number of syllabi or places where most of the better stuff is listed as like a table of contents. But so far, when I've tried to give them things to read from my blogs or other sites, more often than not, they simply are not allowed. Or they can read the title of the blog, they can read the title of the article, but they're simply not digesting the actual content. And I'm not sure when.
Couldn't you just copy paste the text into
well, we're talking about 3 or 4 pages of text. I mean, theoretically, you could.
No, I'm saying Gemini will do all the books of Harry Potter.
Yeah, but I didn't write those. I'm talking about stuff that I wrote.
No, I don't think maybe when we have Sam Chan on here, we can just do it and show you. You just literally take your text, like a PDF. You can take your text, put it into just a TXT file.
I've done that for stuff that's like less than a page worth of material. But anything that, well, but basically I have to extract the content and paste the content in to one of the GPTs. I can't just give it the URL where it already exists. It won't read it off.
Right. No, I'm aware of that. So I'm just saying, if you could take your content, copy and paste it into text files, if you don't have it in a text file or in a PDF.
I can't give it a page where I have a list of all my articles and say, read all these articles by me and integrate them. So I can't, it won't do that. I would have to give it I would have to go to a dozen or two dozen blog posts and one by one feed them in, and then I'm over the limit of the token size.
Well, this is what I'm saying. I'll go with you to these 24 different places on the web. You can press, there's a little up button on, at least on my computer, I have a little button that I press up and it will turn the web page into a PDF.
Well, I can turn yeah, that's not a problem. I can turn pages into PDF, but how can I get an AI to digest a shelf, well, not a shelf, but a book length manuscript?
This is what I'm saying. If you give me the folder with a book length manuscript in that folder, so let's just say 1 gigabyte of text information.
Yeah.
I'll upload that to a language model, and then we'll create a GPT, a general pre-trained model around that corpus.
Well, then you have to have a machine that can read all that text and generate an LLM database, an LLM matrix.
I have that. That's what I'm trying to say. We've been doing this for 3 years.
See, I don't have anything like that.
Yeah, for 3 years we've been doing this. We've been giving it all the corpus of all the information of, say, Carl Sagan, and then creating a language model around Carl Sagan's work.
Yeah, doing Carl Sagan is going to be a lot more worthwhile than doing Barry Court stuff. My stuff is.
But I'm just saying, it would be a fun little experiment here on GCC to talk to the GPT of your work and see if it can, you can actually help train it and weight it.
Yeah, I mean, I've done that with I've taken individual blog posts and pasted in the content of individual blog posts, which is basically a page worth of text, and I've done that with ChatGPT, and gotten some useful stuff out that was non-trivial. But the thing, like, for example, the stuff I really wanted to look at was the stuff that was my scientific peer-reviewed stuff, like on emotions and learning. Got nowhere with that. It just, it couldn't parse that material. It was just either too much, or it wouldn't read the Google Sites page, or whatever it was.
Which one were you using? Which model?
I think I was using ChatGPT 4 at the time.
Okay.
6 months ago. Oh, the one that Sam was paying for a ChatGPT 4 subscription for about half a year or so. And during that time, I tried to get it to read my, not just haphazard think pieces like blogs, but stuff that had some academic merit. And it couldn't.
And how long ago was this?
I was going to say, well, 6 months to a year ago.
Oh, it's completely different now.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got ChatGPT 4.0 now, and the new Claude and whatever they're called, Gemini. I noticed yesterday that when I gave Gemini a word to explain to me, it took note of the town I lived in and gave me a particular response that was local to where I live. I get.
Sorry.
You're not sorry.
Siri.
Sorry. So Gemini will actually say, by the way, since you live in Bedford, and then it says, here's an item that corresponds to your geographic location that ties into this thing you asked me to tell you about.
Right. It's just reading your IP address.
Yeah, I'm sure that's how it did it. I mean, 'cause my IP address is Verizon, and it knows that I'm in, probably knows that. Well, it knew I was in Bedford. It knew that, which is actually just a particular town within my IP area. So
Yeah, I'm just waiting for us to use this technology to help us grok lots of information quickly for the group and be able to create the things that would take us a year to do in Collaborology.
I mean, clearly,
we can do in 15 minutes.
Clearly, the original work that I produced is what I would like to have survive me in a form that's well written, entertaining, informative. Well, I don't expect it to go viral, but at least that it can reach an audience beyond the audience that I reach with my style of writing.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, if we put in the corpus of your writing And then we start formatting it into different iterations, save those files in a knowledge repository as different versionings.
Yeah.
And then ask other ones to grok the different, in other words, clean up some of the data so it can be put into another one, and then have that one clean it up to put into another one, and then take that information and put it out to the mass public. But before we put it out, have you read it and say, is this what you meant to say? But is it formatted better? And did it do the job of recontextualizing?
I could see a
Your-
grad student, doing that kind of an exercise. I can't see me doing it at my age and.
Okay. I would love to do, like, instead of talking about it, I would love to just do it, because maybe it can do it in a way that you're happy with. Maybe it can. It's up to you to be
Well, I mean, it's not whether I'm happy, it's whether it actually reaches an audience that would not have been reached otherwise, and persuade an audience to have a level of insight that they would like to have had and didn't have otherwise.
well, you don't have to persuade audience. You need to persuade one person with an audience.
Well, one person who would say, I mean, at one time I had a correspondent who was a public school teacher, and he picked up a lot of my work and reproduced it, built on it and reproduced it and spread it around. But even so, I don't think it reached all that many people, even when he was traveling the world, representing this material.
Right. But what was that one person's reach?
Well, he was the chair of the IEEE Education Committee, or whatever it's called, Education Society.
I don't care if he's the president of the United States. He could have been Jimmy Carter. If Jimmy Carter does, I'm just saying there's people that had reach, but at the current time, if they don't have, it's a metric. You can just look exactly at how many views
I mean, he was the chair of the Education Society of IEEE. He was traveling around the world presenting this stuff for about a decade. He just died. He died not too long ago. And I really don't know. I couldn't tell you. I can tell you, I mean, he was even writing columns for the monthly journal of the Education Society. And so I know that people who subscribed to the Education Society journals had access to whatever he wrote, but whether they did anything with it, I couldn't tell you. Maybe some of them did, but.
Well, let's just reach one person, which is Sabine Hoffenstetter, and just reach her, because I know exactly what her reach is.
I tried to reach Grant Sanderson. I thought Grant Sanderson might like to cover some of the material, but he never even acknowledged receiving a suggestion.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I'll talk to Sam Hahn and Sam Chan, and we'll create a day. Maybe it's a couple of weeks from now, but I would just like to get it done at some point, so it's just done.
Well,
we can just
I mean,
not
if
think about it.
somebody else, is motivated to do it and has the time, the energy, the know-how, the motivation, God bless you.
We could have already done it in the time we've talked, so we'll just schedule the time.
Okay.
Have a great day, Barry.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, Sam, it is 1:45 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I'll tell you that we went for 2 hours and 45 minutes.